October 3rd, 2019, meeting of the Planning Board. First order of business is review and approve minutes, and there are no minutes for us to review this month. The second is to review and sign bills. I have bills, they're all from Graves Engineering. 600 Turnpike, Boston Turnpike, site plan review, $1,593.75. 939 Boston Turnpike, site plan review, $594.75. 8 Centennial Drive, site plan review, $333. 274 Walnut Street, site plan review, $1,975.75, totaling $4,497.25. Do I have?
Move to approve as read.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
No, you do. Top sheet.
Gotta start bringing my glasses.
Okay. While that's going around, do we have any board member comments? Mr. Gordon?
No, thank you.
Tim?
No, Mr. Chairman, I don't.
Mr. Rowland?
None this month, Mr. Chairman.
No, sir.
I'm all set as well. Go to the meetings. The first meeting is a continued public hearing for location 280 South Quinsigamon Ave for a site plan and special permit for a duplex. Please identify yourself for the record.
Good evening, Mike McGovern from McGovern Development Corp. Here to represent the new duplex and site plan and special permit. It is a continuation. I think we had the same board when we went over the project the last time. I guess the thing that's changed since then is we have our order of conditions with an approved order of conditions, so I think that was the last criteria I needed to meet for the special permit. If we have any other further discussion, I'm glad to answer any questions.
Okay. Does anyone on the board have any questions?
No.
I'm abstaining from this.
I'll try.
I think the only reason we had it was open was he didn't have an order of
We're
conditions.
just waiting until they expire, correct?
Yes, sir.
No, sir, I think we covered everything last
Yeah.
time.
Okay, I don't have any questions. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to be heard? No, so may I,
I
motion?
move that we close the public hearing on the site plan review and special permit for 280 South Quinsigamon Avenue. the proposed
Second.
duplex.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we do have a draft decision in front of us. I'm sure you've gotten a copy of it as well. Is there any questions that you have from the draft decision? You had an opportunity to review the draft decision? Any questions regarding the draft decision at all?
I move that we authorize the clerk to sign and you poll us, and the chair poll us as to our approval of this special permit.
There was one waiver for the photometric plan.
Oh, okay. And we authorized granting the waiver for the photometric plan.
Yeah. So I would just include that in your motion, the waiver.
Okay, I move that we authorize the clerk to sign, the chair to poll, and the board to grant the waiver for the photometric plan.
Second,
Okay, so Mr. Gordon, are you in favor of this?
yes.
Mr. Rolikis?
I'm in favor of this.
Mr. Thomas?
In favor.
And I am in favor. So, you're all
So
set?
motion carries, right?
Yes. That's all we have, right?
Yep.
Okay, very good. You're all set.
Jay,
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's the site plan you'll sign. And I'll sign again here.
Send it down there, everybody.
You sign first, sign there and the other one. Yep. Thank you.
The next public hearing is a continued public hearing for 360 Hartford Turnpike, site plan approval. Is there anyone present?
I do not see the applicant, Mr. Chairman. I recommend taking the next one out of order.
Okay, does anyone have any issue with that?
Nope.
No,
The next hearing is a new public hearing for retail marijuana establishment, site plan and special permit, location 939 Boston Turnpike.
I have to read the legal notice here.
Excuse me?
I have to read the legal
Oh,
notice.
yeah, so if you want to wait for a moment while the clerk reads the notice.
legal notice. The Shrewsbury Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Thursday evening, October 3rd, 2019, at 7 PM in the Selectmen's Hearing Room at the Richard D. Carney Municipal Office Building, 100 Maple Avenue, Shrewsbury, Mass. To hear the application of Pharmacanis Massachusetts Incorporated, 1010 Lake Street, second floor, Oak Park, Illinois, 60301, as required by the Town of Shrewsbury zoning bylaw, Section 7, subsection F3, and Section 7, subsection T, for site plan approval and special permit by the planning board and registered.
Excuse me. Fix it so they can see it. Sorry.
For the construction of a marijuana establishment inclusive of a marijuana retailer and registered marijuana dispensary, parking and associated improvements as shown on plans entitled Site Plan, Site Improvement Plan, 939 Boston Turnpike, dated August 5th, 2019, and revised on August 12th, 2019, in 6 sheets prepared by GAF Engineering Incorporated, 266 Main Street, Wareham, Mass. 02571, sent by William F. Madden, P.E., and Robert A. Brayman Jr., PLS, upon property located north of Boston Turnpike and westerly of Walnut Street. Subject premise consists of Shrewsbury Assessors Tax Plate 36, Plot 053000. A copy of the plans may be seen in the office of the Engineering Department in Municipal Office Building.
Thank you. Please introduce
Good
yourself.
evening, I'm Attorney Rod St. Pierre, I represent the applicant this evening. With me this evening is 3 members of the company, Matt Levine, Johnny Hernandez, and Shelley Stormo, that are here to answer any questions the board might have. Also, Bill Madden is from JF Engineering, who did the site plan work, and Bill will go through the plan with you. And we also have Adam Hellman, who's the architect involved in the project. So they're here to answer, again, any questions the board might want to address. There were 2 letters that were issued to the board. One was by Bernie and the other was by Grave Engineering. Bill and I met with Bernie to address his concerns, both he and Grave Engineering, and we incorporated, Bill incorporated the revisions into the plan that is before you this evening. We also met with Chief Hester to discuss about the traffic that they had, as well as Bernie, and we've incorporated the traffic management program by way of a letter that my client submitted to the board that addresses the issues brought up by the chief. I'd like to turn everything over to Bill now to go through the site plan and to walk you through the process. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Bill Madden. I'm with GAF Engineering. Our office is in 266 Main Street in Wareham. We're retained by Pharmacan to prepare the site plan for the conversion of the existing building at 939 Boston Turnpike to the marijuana dispensary that they propose in that area. We did meet with the town planner, and we reviewed his letter that he prepared and submitted to you and provided categorized responses to each one of the comments that were raised in his letter. We also did the same with the engineering review by Graves Engineering. So we looked at all those comments. I think that we were in agreement with each and every one. They're good comments, good review, and you know, we prepared the final plans, and I think submitted them around the third to the planning board around the 3rd week of September. I don't know how what your preference is for me to explain the plan to you. Would you prefer me to?
Yeah, so this is the first hearing for this, so I would prefer an overview of the site, all associated items.
Perfect.
With that.
It's do I need to turn this?
Just a little bit so we can, but we do want the audience to be able to see as well. Thank you.
Okay. The first sheet that we show here is essentially the locus plan, the cover sheet. We indicate the zoning district. It's a requirement that you have in the your regulations. It was brought up as one of the review letters, so we took an excerpt directly from the zoning bylaw, placed it on the cover sheet, along with the zoning data that's pertinent to the site. It indicates the zoning district, the frontage requirements, the area requirements, things of that nature. We indicate what is required and what is proposed in each one. So we're able to identify our lot coverage, our lot area, the frontages, things of that nature in that table. We also show it on the USGS quad sheet and then on an aerial overview plan that kind of gives us a little better view of what the surrounding area looks like. It's currently a vacant building, used to house a motorcycle shop in that location. We're intending to repurpose it on both the first and the second floor for use as the dispensary. It's bounded by residential property to the north and to the east. To the south, it's bounded by Route 9 and some vacant land to the west. The second sheet that we prepare typically is the existing conditions plan and the demolition. What we're showing here is the limit of work, which comprises about a little less than 32,000 square feet of work area. It's essentially the footprint of the parking lot, a little bit of the area just outside of that parking lot. And it indicates what we're proposing to prepare the site for the few upgrades that are proposed in this instance. We show the existing driveway access off of Route 9 westbound. It's approximately a 60-foot curb cut onto the highway. We enter into the site and have approximately 24-foot wide traveled lane with parking on the west side of the main entrance. We have a circular parking pattern on the site. What we did do is we show a little bit of demolition in here. There's a large area of pavement that really wasn't it wasn't able to be utilized for parking or vehicle circulation. So we thought it might be better suited as a landscape feature. So we show us removing about 900 square feet of paved surface in that area. So this plan indicates all of the demolition that we're looking to do. We're looking to also place some Cape Cod berm along that easterly side of the parking area. We're also looking to put a wooden guardrail. There's a little bit of a grade change at the north of the site, so we thought that in addition to the berm, that a guardrail would be suitable at that location. We also show some clearing and removing of some vegetation that's immediately adjacent to the east side of the parking area. That area could be used for some snow storage areas and things of that nature. So that's what we're indicating there. So there really isn't a whole lot of demolition going on there. I'll point to a couple of things that we're going to do to improve the drainage system at the suggestion of Graves Engineering, which is a good comment to bring up. So we will show that on another plan. But that plan essentially indicates the site the way it is, the 32,000 square feet of active work area, the building, the water service is shown, the sewer, which is on site Title V, septic, which is located in this area here. And that's pretty much it. The site benchmark is a fire hydrant that's at the front of the property, and should remain there through the duration of the project. So in the need of some elevations, we have a pretty solid benchmark at that location. The second sheet is really the sheet that indicates the work that we're proposing to do. We essentially are going to retain the existing driveway entrance. We're going to reline and remark the parking spaces. We're able to reconfigure the parking and show 29 parking spaces on the site. 28 would be required by zoning in town. So we exceed that by a space, 2 of which are going to be van accessible handicap parking spaces. We show one that's in a little small cluster of 3 parking spaces to the east of the property, as there's an entrance door that would be located on that northeast side of the building. So it is beneficial to have those handicap spaces as reasonably close to the front door as possible. So we're indicating 1 space there, and then we're showing another handicap space in this central parking area that we proposed. You can see the 900 square feet that we removed from asphalt over here. It's a landscape feature now that's added to the site. We indicate the plant material in the planting list and the size and the quantity of the plants. So we're putting a couple of shade trees in there, about 12 shrubs, and then some, I'll call it, although not 100% accurate, some ground cover type material underneath the trees and intermingled with the shrub layer. Any areas that are disturbed that were turfed at one point in time, they're called to be reloamed and seeded. And that's pretty much it with respect to the landscaping. The painting of the parking lot is what's going on there. The guardrail is at the north side of the property. It's indicated on this plan as well. And the catch basin that we were talking about where the demolition was to occur, Graves had a comment in there about improving some of the drainage characteristics over there. So we're indicating that we'd like to have a Cape Cod berm around that basin, directing any of the surface water runoff directly to the basin. The basin is going to be refitted with, it currently has catch basin hood in it, but as part of this work, we're going to inspect and clean the entire drainage system. If it's necessary to replace any of the hoods that are in the few catch basins that are on site, that is also part of the work plan. Prior to the start of construction, all the catch basins will be fitted with a silt sack. It's just an insert that goes inside the catch basin to catch any debris that's generated on site, prevent it from being carried off the property. At the conclusion of the work, those silt sacks will be removed and they'll properly dispose of any sediment that might be contained within it. And the system, after it's cleaned, will be put in service. Let's see, our parking schedule is located on the upper right of the plan, and we're also looking to add additional sidewalk in this parking area for pedestrian access. So we've created a small sidewalk with that landscape area, and that'll provide access to the building as well. And that's pretty much it with the vehicle circulation and the parking. It's really just a reutilization of the existing space, cleaning things up a bit, and moving forward from there. The following sheets indicate our general notes that we typically put the responsibility on the contractor to maintain control of the site. He's responsible for a lot of things he's responsible for everything that goes on the site. And if there is any sediment that leaves the property, he's going to be required to clean that up and take care of it. We don't anticipate that to be an issue with the controls that we have designed and put in place. We have some construction notes and some erosion control notes. Our typical signpost detail, there will be some signposts necessary. We show some at the exit leaving the site, some right-hand turn only, no left-hand, right-hand turn only, no left-hand turns on the one-way. We also show some handicap parking signs for the van accessible spaces that we're proposing. This is the detail that we used. We indicate the paint type, the width of the painting, the handicap detail, how our berm is to be constructed, how our guac is to be constructed, the silt sack that I previously talked about, and the detail of the wooden guardrail. It's essentially an 8x8 post, 3x12 type construction, metal backing plates at the joints between the posts and the cross timbers, let's call them. And that's essentially it with the plan. It's relatively straightforward, and be happy to answer any more detailed questions you may have.
One thing I noticed or did not notice on the plan is you're not planning on having an outdoor dumpster?
No,
Dumpster, rather?
with this type of facility, and we've worked with Pharmachem and other clients in the past, all of the trash disposal is going to be conducted by a private contractor, and there'll be no need to have an exterior dumpster, so there's no risk security-wise with product being put out with the trash and what have you. So that's what the proposal is for trash disposal.
Okay. Does anybody have a question about the site itself? Any questions about site, Steve?
My only question was the dumpster, so no, I'm good.
So, on the operations side of things, there's someone here to present,
Matt, as far as the operation, go ahead.
yeah, to present the,
Okay,
how
why don't
the.
you go to an overview of the operation? I guess you or Shelley?
Sure. Exactly what do you mean by, I'm happy to answer any operational questions, but just want to make sure we.
We know that, CCC is controlling much of what's, could you just identify yourself, please?
Sure, I'm Matt Levine, Director of New Markets for Farmington, sorry.
No worries. So hours of operation, how many employees are you looking at? We want to talk a little bit about how we're going to handle traffic and things of that nature.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, why don't you have him sit up at
Yeah.
the desk so the microphone picks him up?
So, thanks. Again, my name is Matt Levine, Director of New Markets for Farmington. Thanks again for the opportunity and for working with us for a while now on this project, so much appreciated. In terms of the hours of operation, I'm just gonna, if you don't mind asking
No,
our
no worries.
District Manager here, Shelley, what do you think are, okay. So right now, proposed is 8 AM to 10 PM. That's currently what we're doing in Wareham, where we have an adult use
How many
dispensary.
days a week?
7 days a week? 7 days a week. And in terms of just the licensing process from the by the CCC, obviously, if we are able to go forward and build our facility, we're not able to open our doors or accept any kind of product until all, various inspections from the Cannabis Control Commission, which is the regulating body here in the state. In terms of employees on site, well, right now, we have over 50 employees in total. 45 to 50 employees at our Wareham location. My anticipation is we won't open with that many, would 20 to 30 employees here? Okay, great. So probably 40 employees would be required.
At this facility.
At this facility.
At the same time.
How many employees on site at the same time?
15.
About 15.
Thank you.
What other questions can we answer? I'm happy to, provide any detail here. Just want to make sure we.
Well, one of the biggest concerns that I know most communities are having is relative to the traffic
Sure.
aspect of this.
Again, we met with Chief Esther, and his request, as well as Bernie, the first 2 weeks will be appointment only, which is what they suggested, and that's incorporated in our traffic managed program. So that'd be pretty much coincide to what's being proposed on Route 20 as well. So we piggyback that as far as the traffic management.
Okay. Well, one of the things I did notice on some of the literature, I think it was in the earlier information that we got, one of the things that you had mentioned is you have secured off-site parking in other facilities, and that I did not notice that in the latest information that you gave back as far as the plan for, the appointment only, and you're gonna have a detail for a specified period of time.
Correct.
And then evaluate whether or not that needs to be continued. But in that last letter, I did not see anything about securing off-site parking.
So the reason why that came out is because of our experience in Wareham, and also just the experience across the rest of the state. So Wareham was the 4th store to open in the state, and some of these earlier, even the 1st or 2nd or 3rd, there were stories about just overcrowding and parking issues. So when we opened in Wareham, we did have that, but that has since gone by the wayside very quickly. Even though in Wareham, just keep in mind, there are no dispensaries close to us, like there will be, closer competition here. We had, for example, the summer months of Cape traffic, there were no dispensaries past Wareham on the Cape, so we were, busier than we expected in a kind of a tight corner right next to a hospital in downtown Wareham, if you're familiar with the location. Nothing like the openness of our parking that we have here and a nice thoroughfare like Route 9. And the town, very early on, very quickly, the town said we could get rid of that alternative parking. We certainly kept the police detail at our expense. And do we still have police detail? We still have police detail there at our expense. And the parking, we have 13 spaces on site there, and there are access to some other parking spaces that Wareham has worked with us, but nothing close to the 29 that we have on site here. And again, we expect this to be a thriving business, but not like what we've seen in Wareham over the last 4 to 6 months.
And how are you handling the appointment only? Are you doing that online? How is the community gonna understand what the appointment only is?
So we'll make it clear via any kind of postings we can, working with the town and also just via our own postings. I think it'll be via our website, and also we have a call center, which is actually a unique characteristic of our company for the industry. We have a national call center where we take all calls centrally, and then, distribute from there. So either calling or registering online will be an option.
I feel like I'm asking all the questions. Do you have any other questions from the?
I'm all set.
Is Wareham still by appointment only?
No, actually Wareham was never by appointment only. That store opened, opened our doors day
Is
one.
this gonna be by appointment?
Yes.
Yes. for the first
Again,
2
that's,
weeks.
that's the recommendation, Chief Hester and Bernie, so we incorporated that into the traffic management program letter that was submitted to the board.
Only until
For
you,
2 weeks.
for 2 weeks,
2
by
weeks, right.
appointment only, yeah.
And then we have to get the blessing of the chief and, to kind of move on.
Is it by appointment only for recreational and medical, or just, it's by appointment only
Both.
across the board?
Both.
Okay.
Good question.
So just to address the boards, I took the language that we used at 235 Hartford, which is the other marijuana establishment in town, and incorporated into this one, which is after those 2 weeks are over. They're gonna sit down with myself and Chief Hester, and we're gonna go over to see how things have been going so far, and then determine at that time, and this is written in the condition of the decision, to go over at that time whether or not to continue the appointment over, to amend it, to do something else, or move on entirely. So there is that check in place so that the chief and I can sit down with them and just go over and see if there is something that needs to continue, or if things are going fine, then, we'll give them our blessing to move
I'd
ahead
like to
then.
see it in the decision,
Yes.
It is in the decision.
okay?
The only other thing I can remember, and I know we had a pre-meeting on Tuesday, the signs that you're mentioning here, there's some conflicting, there's I guess artist
The way
rendition
the picture's
of multiple.
portrayed, it's gonna be the same location, but I think it's just only gonna be one post, not two posts as it shows.
But you'll
One
end
of
up
the
having-
pictures showed it, yeah, but it's gonna be in the same location, pretty much the same size, but it's only gonna be one post, not two. Am I correct? I think I was trying to think, yeah, it's gonna be the one post. And we have a special, there was a plan submitted for the sign. I'm
Right,
pretty
and
sure-
one of the images did show two posts,
two,
and one
but-
of them showed one post. So I think the board wasn't sure, and they kept
Right.
asking me, which one was it? And I said, I didn't know.
Yeah, I
Ask you.
thought I clarified it'd be the one post. I
So,
thought that.
it will be
the
one
email
post.
could- Yeah, but it'll be just one post.
Where is it? Top of the grade?
It's in the existing place where the current
Okay.
Right
double
where the sign's
posted
located now.
Yamahas,
Okay.
Suzuki.
But the sign now has two posts, so they're just gonna go to one post.
And they'll require a building permit from the building inspector for
Inspector to do
that,
that,
so
right.
the dimensions will have to be given to her for enforcement.
Is it going to be lighted?
I'm sorry?
Is it going to be lighted?
I would suspect it would be,
I
yeah.
think so, somehow, yes.
Again, we would bring that to Patty, Patty's attention to get her approval of that.
I'm fine.
Does anybody have any other questions?
No, sir.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience?
I know we had submitted 4 requests for waivers. I'm not sure how you want to proceed with that.
Let me find out if there's questions from the
Okay, good,
audience
good,
first.
fine.
Okay. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to be heard? There being none, okay. So now we can talk about waivers.
Yeah, we had submitted 4 waivers. One was the photometric plan, also the landscape plan, which is in the front of the building, which is in the state right away. None of that's really gonna change. The drainage calculation for stormwater plan, and then the review fee of the $500 is just, it's redundant for the special permit. We're paying a $4,000 review fee. We'd ask you to waive the $500 one. So those are the 4 waivers that were requested.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions surrounding the waivers?
No, I don't.
Stormwater one?
But I'm not one to waive fees.
Yeah, I'm surprised that one, we didn't get a planner's comment for a recommendation on the, provide-
The fee you did, I think you did in my letter.
I can't remember this.
It was 2 months ago because we missed a month.
Do we have?
But there was, so essentially because it's site plan and special permit, the applicant was required to submit application fee and technical review fee, peer review fee for the site plan, which is $2,000 and $4,000, and then another $5,000 and $1,000 for the special permit. However, since the site is existing site, parking is actually decreasing in size slightly. The building's being repurposed. I thought it was a reasonable request simply because there wasn't much in terms of peer review to be done. In fact, Graves' review was that nothing needed to change in terms of stormwater management, drainage, and so forth, because they're using the existing infrastructure. So I thought it was a reasonable request in this case. They have paid their application fee for both and the technical review fee for the site plan, so I was satisfied in that regard that they'd paid their fees, and the technical review was more than covered by that $4,000.
Plus, what is the town getting from, the applicant?
The technical review fee doesn't go to the town anyways.
No,
That
no,
doesn't cover
I'm
it.
talking about, for securing the, license, how much, what's the town's cut of
So that's in the host community agreement and regulated by the state, but I think it's 3%.
3% of gross sales?
Yes.
Well, you're one of the few that have the opportunity to waive a fee. I just want to let you know that.
Greatly appreciated.
Okay, can I have a motion to close the hearing?
I move that we close the public hearing on the, application for site plan approval and special permit.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we can, if we have no questions about the waivers, has everyone had an opportunity to look at the decision?
I move that we authorize the clerk to execute the decision entitled Decision of the Planning Board regarding application for site plan approval and special permit for marijuana retailer and registered marijuana dispensary, 939 Boston Turnpike, Pharmacanas, Massachusetts, Inc.
Do I have a second?
As well as grant the waivers.
Did you want to go quickly through the condition of what we put in for parking, or are we okay? Before you say second. Everyone's okay on that?
Where are we?
I think we're okay.
I think we're okay.
Okay.
Everyone's okay with it?
All right,
I think we're fine.
okay, sorry, didn't, continue?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I think it's a special permit, so you gotta ask us.
Oh, yes, we have to do it.
Oh, so let me ask directly, Mr. Gordon,
Yes,
favor?
yes.
In favor?
I'm in favor.
I am in favor.
I am in favor.
Great. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Yes, sir.
Let me talk to Steve.
Maybe, the notice down.
Oh, I put it in my,
We can, why don't we go to him now?
is he gonna look for a continuance?
No, I don't think so. I think he's ready. So I think we can go to, so we took 360 out of order, so the next hearing, if we're ready, is a continued public hearing for 360 Hartford Turnpike site plan approval. Mr. Graniger.
Thank you. Just wanted to give you a quick update. We had made all the updates. I think the last updates we gave regarding the planner's comments was adding some additional landscape to buffer some of the abutters. The final thing that we are still waiting for is a final approval from DEP. We had submitted everything to him. It took a little while for him to review it, and now we're just waiting for them to issue the permit. We anticipate having the permit within a couple of weeks, so I think that was the only outstanding item, and once that gets issued, obviously we'll be giving the planning board a copy of that, so hopefully we can close things out at next month's hearing. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. I believe, Bernie, you do have a draft decision for that, or? no?
I don't have one yet, nope.
Okay, all right, so once we get that, we'll take a look at it, and we're looking to kind of close this up once we get DEP, their final blessing.
Okay, and the only thing, I have an extra sheet of paper here. There was an email communication between you and Bernie about 5 items. I'm assuming that those were incorporated in the.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So will the board be seeing those at the next meeting then, on the plan, on the
Yes.
overhead?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
So, I just wanted to give you a quick update because it's kind of been dragging on, but part of it's just been dealing with the state process.
I understand. Okay.
Okay?
Well, do I have a motion to continue this hearing? Does anybody have a question or?
What are we gonna
concern?
continue it to? Is the
It's,
November
November
7th
7th, yeah.
realistic? John?
It is, because they said, it should be done within 2 weeks because there is a time frame that he has to have the permit issued by, so that's within a couple of weeks.
All right. So,
I move that we continue the public hearing on the 360 Hartford Turnpike site plan approval until Thursday, November 7th at 7 PM.
can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much.
I gotta read the next
Okay,
notice.
the next item of business, Mr. Thomas will be recusing himself. We have a new public hearing for a new duplex at location 326 Boston Turnpike, and we'll have the legal notice, please.
Sure. This legal notice also ran in the Worcester Telegram on September 18th and September 25th. The Shrewsbury Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Thursday evening, October 3rd, 2019, at 7 PM in the Selectmen's Hearing Room at the Richard D. Carney Municipal Office Building, 100 Maple Avenue, Shrewsbury, Massachusetts, to hear the application of Mosaic Development Group LLC, 48 Harrington Avenue, Shrewsbury, Mass. 01545, as required by the Town of Shrewsbury zoning bylaw, section Roman numeral 7F3, for site plan approval by the planning board to allow for the construction of a duplex and associated improvements in the limited business districts, limited business zoning district. The proposed development is shown on plans entitled Proposed Lot Development Plan Number 326 Boston Turnpike, consisting of 4 sheets dated August 22nd, 2019, prepared by Quinn Engineering, Inc., P.O. Box 107, Paxton, Massachusetts, 01612, and stamped by Kevin J. Quinn, P.E. The subject property is located to the west of Cassavan Avenue and south of Boston Turnpike, and consists in whole or in part of Shrewsbury's Assessor's Plate 32, Plot 569,000. A copy of the plans may be seen in the office of the Planning and Economic Development Department in the Municipal Office Building, 100 Maple Avenue, Shrewsbury, Mass.
What's that? Okay, please introduce yourself.
Tom Paquette. Tom Paquette, Mosaic Development.
Carl Haltman, Quinn Engineering. Property's located at 226 Hartford Turnpike, Boston Turnpike. About 20,000 square feet of area. This is Boston Turnpike right here, Route 9. Cassavan Ave is here. Power lines come through back here. About 114 feet of frontage on Boston Turnpike, 182 on Cassavan Ave. Located in the limited business district. The line actually goes through the property here, so this is the limited business district line. That's limited business. This is residence B1 here, and then the entire property is located within the Lakeway Overlay District. The applicant's proposing a 2-family dwelling. Dwelling's located entirely in the LB district. 2-family dwellings are allowed by right in the LB district per table 1 of the bylaw. We're not proposing to use any of the provisions of the Lakeway Overlay District. The building has a footprint of 1,870 square feet. That's 935 per unit. The structure meets the dimensional requirements of table 2. 3 parking spaces are required. Each dwelling unit has a 1-car garage and then also space for another vehicle outside the building. So we've got a total of 4 parking spaces. In general, the site slopes from Route 9 and Cassavan Ave towards the rear of the property. We've got a BBW back here that was delineated by Ecotech. We've filed a stormwater permit that's been approved. Conservation Commission closed their meeting on September 17th. We've got municipal sewer and water services proposed. We've got underground stormwater chambers here and here. Those were reviewed as part of the stormwater permit. Erosion controls are on the back here. We had comments received from Bernie. We revised the plans and submitted last Thursday. I think we've resolved those comments. Happy to answer any questions if you guys have them.
Anybody have any questions up here? Okay.
Good.
Okay.
Excuse me.
The only thing I, like, personally, I wish more duplexes would come looking like this, because you got the garages off to the side, and you got a little bit of, not this flat frontage, looking piece of the face, so I like that a lot. Did notice that on the elevations, we only have a frontal elevation here.
Yeah, so actually, we just got some rear and side yard elevations in as well. If I can share those with you now.
Sure, please.
I only got a couple of copies here. So
That's okay.
feel free to peruse. I'll get you more as,
No,
as I-
this will be fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Plus the units are only 1,000 square feet.
Right, yeah,
The units are only 1,000 square feet, you know,
About that.
like,
roughly, yeah.
the others are like 2,400.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, does anybody have any questions? Okay, this is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience? Whoop,
What is the height, Tom?
29.8?
About 29.8, 29.5, somewhere around there.
Okay.
I
Thank you.
think it was consistent with what was going on in the neighborhood. I think I read in the narrative,
Okay.
correct? Okay. This is a public hearing. Does anyone in the audience wish to be heard? Seeing none, do I have a motion to close the hearing?
Move that we close the hearing.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We do have a draft decision in front of us. Does anyone have an opportunity to look at the draft decision?
Mr. Chairman, there were two waivers for this application. The first one was to not provide a photometric plan, which I had recommended in my letter, and the other one was to not provide the required datum based on NAVD 1988. That's a metric of measurement, topographical, GIS, all that. I spoke with our GIS coordinator and Andy Truman. Both of them gave their blessing to not provide it to that datum. So I include that recommendation as well in my letter, just so the board is aware.
Okay,
And I do not believe there were any
that's all I see.
conditions that were unusual in this one that were different than anything else.
Who's gonna sign if Jay's not?
Oh, did I put, oh, all right, I'll change that. It would probably be you, Steve,
Okay.
so I'll just put that in. Do you mind running and grabbing?
So do I have a motion to accept this decision? Mel, you,
Move to accept the decision as written.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're all set. Thank you.
You.
Okay. Here's where you get a break, huh?
Huh?
So here's where you get a break.
I get a break.
Okay, our next hearing is, excuse me, a continued public hearing that Mr. Rotalakis will be recusing himself for, and Mr. Perna Rao will be sitting in. This is the Edgemere Crossing at Flint Pond, site plan and special permit. Our topic of this evening is traffic and internal circulation. The applicants are ready.
Need just a moment, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. Yep, no worries, take your time. And now, if you want to take a restroom break, now would be a good time.
No, I'm all set. Okay. But thank you for asking.
Turns out we actually have an adapter now.
Oh, we do, all right. So I don't, can I use yours?
No, make sure all of you have one first.
I have one more.
Drop it off here. If you would.
You got it.
Mr. Donahue? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Mark Donahue from Fletcher Tilton on behalf of the applicant and the owner. With me this evening, with the topic being traffic and circulation, is Rob Nagy of VHB and Roy Smith of RJ O'Connell, the civil engineers for the site. Since the approval in 2017 of the rezoning that allowed this project to proceed, Market Basket and the owner of the site have been focused on traffic improvements. It has been a long process. It has benefited from not just our own research that VHB has done, but the fact that simultaneously, on a totally different path, Massachusetts Department of Transportation was doing a mass study of the Route 20 corridor and evaluating the needs of that corridor. Much of that work has already proceeded and gone forward. It resulted in the MassWorks grant, which we talked about on the first night of the hearing, that has been granted for traffic improvement in and around the Lake Street intersection. So you have all of that as background, and Mr. Nagy is going to touch on pieces of that, certainly in his presentation. You have the June 2019 report that was part of our initial application that VHB did, looking at the number of intersections, quite a number of intersections that were evaluated and discussed with the town peer consultants before that report was actually completed. You have since received the comments from MDM Transportation from their review of Mr. Nagy's report. We've had a chance to sit with the town planner and with MDM to review those, and you have further comments that you're receiving now. So what I've asked Mr. Nagy to do is kind of take an awful lot of information and an awful lot of study and try to make it so it's cohesive for people and they can understand it, certainly so you can understand it, but also so that, because at our first meeting, this was one of the subject matters that resonated through the concerns of the neighborhood. And I want to be able to demonstrate how the applicant and the owner have worked aggressively with the state and with the town, we think, to come up with some reasonable solutions. So with your permission, I'll have Mr. Nagy walk through his report.
Thank you. Again, for the record, my name is Rob Nagy. I'm with VHB, and I saw Bob Michaud from MDM walk in right on time. So what I want to do today is maybe take 15, 20 minutes, just walk you through the traffic study itself. I think when we were here the last time at the introductory meeting, we did a quick overview of it and didn't really give you a whole lot of stats and data. I'm an engineer, I want to give you a little bit of stats and data on the project and really sort of walk you through what we did as we analyzed the traffic conditions out there, ultimately coming up with a mitigation and access plan for the project. So in my presentation here today, I'm really just going to walk you through the traffic impact study, the existing conditions, future conditions, and then traffic operations, how we project all the traffic to be flowing in and around the area out there. I'll touch on the MassWorks project, its status, where it's at, talk a little bit about our recommendations and mitigation for the project, and then if there's any questions, we'll talk about next steps. So for this project, you're all familiar, I suspect, with the project site. It's the former Edgemere Drive-In Theater, just off of Hartford Turnpike, Route 20. The city of Worcester's just to the west. And as you travel east on Route 20, you get to the truck stop and the town of Northborough ultimately, and Westborough, and those communities out there, Route 9. But the project site here is somewhat unique in that it's surrounded by commercial development of what I deem as sort of more industrial uses. They are certainly commercial in many different ways, but there's a lot of traffic that's related to the activities that are going on around here. But it's changing. It's certainly changing over time. And as we looked at this study, what we did was we looked at a number of different intersections, specifically 6 of them within the city, the town of Shrewsbury, several more in the city of Worcester, and we looked at 3 specific roadway corridors, namely Route 20, right in front of the site, Lake Street, and Puritan Street. Those were all issues that were brought up when we were here the last time, and we'll certainly want to touch on each of those. It's getting washed out, which is why I gave you the handout here. But the intersections that we looked at initially are shown in these little blue dots and red dots along Route 20. Those indicate the signalized intersections and unsignalized intersections. After we did our initial study, we came back and we looked at the intersection of Puritan Street with Route 20 as well, because we knew that that was an issue, and people wanted to focus a little bit of time on that. Traffic volumes that exist out there today along Route 20 range anywhere between 22,000 and 19,000 cars per day traveling up and down the roadway. During the busy times of the morning and evening peak hours, you're anywhere from 1,500 to about 1,750 cars an hour in the morning. A little bit busier in the evening with about almost 1,800 cars an hour driving by the site. And then on Saturday, it's a little less volume out there with about 1,300 to 1,400 cars an hour driving in and around the project site out there. Safety is something that we take very seriously when we look at these, and we know that this Route 20 corridor is busy, and it's got several intersections that have problems with it, pre-existing problems. So one of the things we do as traffic engineers is we do what's called a roadside safety audit, where we go out there with town staff, Mass DOT staff, and sometimes they're even joined by federal highway staff, and really roll up our sleeves, get with the public safety officials and look at a number of issues that are affecting specific intersections that show high crash tendencies. The intersection of Lake Street and Route 20, which is essentially the front door to this project, was identified as a high crash location and something that we wanted to obviously take great care in looking at. And previously, the intersection of Grafton Street at Route 20, where the truck stop is essentially, was done prior to our involvement in this project back in 2015. And there were a number of safety improvements that were recommended as part of that effort. Those safety improvements and recommendations are going to be worked into our mitigation, which I'll talk about in a minute. There are future locations in the city of Worcester, several intersections down there. If you're familiar with the Route 20 corridor as it goes into Worcester, you know that the road can get beat up and some of the intersections are a little bit disjointed down there. Those will also be future studies as part of the MEPA, the State Environmental Review process that will continue to go on beyond this local review that we're doing with you here today. Looking into the future, when we look at traffic volumes out here, what we do is we look at what's out there today. We go out, we conduct traffic counts at all the individual intersections along the roadways that I just highlighted for you. And then what we look to is we look at other additional projects that might be coming online that, you know, may add traffic to the corridor out here. So what we did was we worked with Bernie and his staff and a few other folks to try to identify any major projects that were happening out here, any major vacancies that may be coming down the road. And we try to plan for those as we move into the future, and we try to assess the impacts of this project. The two major projects that were identified were the marijuana dispensary almost across the street from this project, a little bit up the street, up the hill there, and a senior housing project off of Lake Street that looked at about 33 senior housing project units. Those two projects have been permitted. They've been before the town. And we wanted to include the traffic impacts associated with those. There was a number of other potential projects that were identified. They weren't quite in the system just yet, like Centec Boulevard. We know that there's potential future development down there. And there's a number of other vacancies as you go further way down Route 20 down towards Northborough. So what we tried to do is capture the potential impacts associated with those by adding a percent per year on top of our growth project, on top of our existing conditions. So basically what we did is we took the existing traffic that we counted out there today, increased it over the next 7 years by 7%, and considered that to be able to capture some of the growth that may happen with those projects. Much like this project, they'll come before you at some point in time as the board with a traffic study if they're major traffic generators, and we'll ideally try to identify their impacts as well and include ours as we move forward. There were also two major roadway projects that were planned that we wanted to make sure were considered in this as well. The first is the intersection of Route 20 and Grafton Street. It's a project that's been working its way through the town and with MassDOT as part of their design review process. Another consultant is working on that. We were in contact with them, Any designs that we ended up generating as part of this project needed to mesh with that project to make sure that there was, you know, seamless transition. MassDOT's been looking over our shoulder to make sure the designs that we've been working on do meet that standard. There's still a little bit of work to be done on that project, but now we're coordinated with them at this point in time. There's also a resurfacing project that's going on a section of Route 20. Again, not a major effort, but it is something that'll be widening the roadway and adding a little bit more capacity in areas outside of this particular project. We just wanted to highlight that. It's not something that's important in the grand scheme of things as far as our traffic impacts are concerned, but it is a movement towards creating a consistent four-lane cross-section, on Route 20, which is essentially what the major recommendation of the Route 20 master plan is working on and working towards. The project itself is, you know, and we didn't talk about the specifics of the project, but the project itself essentially is about, it's an 80,000 square foot supermarket. There's about 50,000 square feet of general retail that will be provided on this site. 13,000 square foot pharmacy, a 2,000 square foot drive-through bank, and about 250 units of housing, of residential rental housing on the site. What we do as traffic engineers is we try to identify what the likely impacts of that project are going to be from a traffic generation perspective. And what we do is we use industry standards of folks who've gone out and actually looked at these types of sites and seen how much traffic they generate. They've compiled it into a book that's called Trip Generation. It's the Trip Generation Manual. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. And what it does is you try to enter your information into it to identify what the impacts of the project are, and then start to add cumulatively what those impacts are, and project traffic during the morning, during the evening rush hour periods, and in this particular case as well as Saturday midday peak hour, because we wanted to recognize that that's a different traffic pattern, but the numbers that I showed you earlier were pretty busy as well. What it ultimately results in is that the residential traffic would be about 84 morning peak hour, 107 evening peak hour, 112 Saturday midday peak hour trips. The gross supermarket trips are shown here, 300 in the morning, not a whole lot, but a lot of that is delivery related. 660 or so, 760 weekday evening and Saturday conditions. And then the other retail is as you see here, it's 100 in the morning, 320 in the evening, 370 in the Saturday condition. But one of the things that's interesting about this site is the mixed-use development. So while we look at the individual uses on the site, one of the benefits of a project like this is that there's cross use between the different uses on the site. The folks who live in the residential units will likely shop in the shopping center there. A trip that needs to take you to the supermarket goes from the residential unit to the supermarket, doesn't go onto Route 20. We design the site right, and we make sure that that's factored into it as well. So what you see here is the shared trip calculation, as well as pass-by trip calculations on the side. Pass-by traffic is also, it's traffic that's already on the roadway, so along Route 20 today, maybe on Lake Street today, who just happens to be driving by the site. You as a consumer, as somebody who wants to go to the supermarket, you may be driving home from work, maybe going to a soccer game at a field, and the route just happens to take you by the supermarket, the pharmacy, and you go in and you pick up your goods. That's not a new trip on Route 20, but it's a trip as it looks at this project. And so that's something we also wanted to consider as we looked at this site. So ultimately, at the end of the day, the traffic impacts associated with the project, the new trips that people are going to see on the roadways, are estimated to be the last column that you see here, about 385 morning trips, about 660 evening trips, and about 870 or so Saturday trips. And again, you now understand why we looked at the Saturday condition as well, because that's the highest generator, and the traffic volumes out there are pretty busy. Armed with that information, we try to now estimate where the traffic is going to be coming from and going to. So what you see here is residential traffic will distribute itself differently than retail traffic. So any of the new trips that I just talked to you about will distribute themselves in and around the project study area based on where they want to go. Now what we use is we use census data, journey to work data. So if you lived in Shrewsbury and in this section of Shrewsbury and you wanted to go to work, We tried to use the census data that's available to us to project where people want to go, and we then overlay that onto the network. So if you live in this area, the biggest draw is likely to head, you're more than likely to work in the Worcester area, so traffic would shoot up either Lake Street or down Route 20 West, and then back up into Worcester that way. Retail traffic, a little bit different. There's competing supermarkets in the area. You're very unlikely as a consumer to drive by 2 or 3 supermarkets to get to this supermarket. I'm sure the owner would love it if you did, but at the same point in time as a user, and this area we know is saturated to some degree with supermarkets out here, we try to take that into account. So we distribute the traffic that's on the roadway based on where supermarkets are located, where the competition is located, as well as where the logical most direct route to the site is. So that's why the columns are a little bit different that you see here. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the majority of the traffic is either going to go eastbound or westbound on Route 20 and then distribute itself into the various different roadways there, or it's going to go up Lake Street up and ultimately down to the Route 9 area. More of the residential traffic is likely to go up Lake Street. I know that's an issue for some of the folks who are probably in the room here today. And so about a quarter of the traffic that's associated with the residential traffic will use Lake Street. Not surprisingly, there's a lot of supermarket uses on Route 9 as you go up Lake Street. It's very unlikely there's a lot of folks that are going to drive down, bypass the Shaws, bypass the Whole Foods and the other uses that are up there to get to the site. But we did assign some traffic to it to consider that there may be a little bit of traffic traveling down that road. This graphic, it's hard to see, almost impossible to see. It's from our traffic study, but it basically shows you the percentages on the local street networks. The important point to note here is that when you think about the numbers of trips that are going to be assigned to these roadways, and I'll specifically talk about Lake Street in specifics, there's only about between 40 and 60, maybe even 70 on the Saturday condition trips that would likely use Lake Street on a regular basis to travel north and south here. The peer review consultant actually challenged us a little bit on that assumption, and what we did was we did a sensitivity analysis, and I'll let him talk a little bit about that, but I'll give you a little bit of a preview as well. So we reassigned some of the traffic onto the area roadways to see if say that 20% threshold that I mentioned before, that quarter of the residential traffic jumped a little bit higher to say 40% of the traffic went in that direction, and the resulting impact's about 10 more cars driving up and down that road. From an operational perspective, not a big impact, but it is something that we wanted to test and make sure that our traffic signals and our roadway infrastructure could support that type of a movement. The end story here is that when we look at traffic impacts, what we do as traffic engineers, we plug this information, all the information I just gave you, into a model. And it's called highway capacity software, highway capacity tools. And what they do is you plug the information in as far as lane widths, as far as traffic control that's out there, how the signals are timed. You plug the information as far as volume is concerned, the makeup of the volume. Is it heavy trucks? Is it passenger vehicles? And you distribute it onto the roadway. Once the model then analyzes the data, it comes back to us and it gives us a projected level of service or amount of delay that drivers will experience at each of the locations. What we do is then assign a letter grade to those. Is it an A? Is it a B, C, D, or E or F? Much like a high school grade card, if you get an F, you've got a problem at the intersection. It's overcapacity. People are waiting too long to get through it. If you're at A, there's no delay whatsoever for the most part. You're able to whiz through the intersection without having to stop. During peak hour conditions, traffic engineers try to target a level of service D. Not something that your kid would be happy about if he came home with, but in this situation here, we like to target a level of service D because it means that traffic is comfortably moving through the corridor. There aren't people that are getting frustrated with the delays out there. They understand it's a rush hour condition and that the majority of the rest of the day, traffic's flowing a little bit better. If you think of it as being in a traffic signal, if you had to wait more than one full light cycle to get through it, you'd be frustrated. That would be a level of service E or F. In this situation, level of service D is you get through in that one cycle and you're comfortable. Each of the intersections that we studied in Shrewsbury operate at level of service D or better at all the signalized locations, particularly when we have the infrastructure put back into place. Again, so we meet that level of service D threshold. There are some unsignalized intersections that we'll talk about in a sec, that do experience a little bit of existing delay. It's hard to get onto Route 20 in certain cases. Those won't see any significant impact. It will still be more difficult for them to get on. But those are unsignalized intersections where you really can't mitigate the impacts associated with them. You can't put a signal there because the 10 or 20 cars that are coming out of the side street really don't need a signal to do that. They just need to wait for that gap in the traffic stream to move through. And it just as important, all the site driveways to this project operate at what level of service C or better. So there's even less delay for at each of the driveways. And that's not just people coming in and out of the site. That's people driving along Route 20 and on Lake Street as well. Site distance is something that we take very seriously. When we site our driveways, can you see oncoming traffic? Obviously, that's something that's very important, particularly on a roadway like Route 20 where you've got speeds that are in excess of 40 or 50 miles an hour at times. And what we've done is we provided information as part of our study that shows that there are more than adequate sight lines for drivers coming in and out of here. And we make recommendations at the end to make sure that those are met moving forward. All the queuing that we model out here is able to fit within the turning lanes that we provide. So as we go into the mitigation sections, which I'll get to in a second here, you'll see that all the volumes are able to be fit into the turning lanes and travel through the intersections without any major delay. And as I mentioned earlier, the unsignalized intersections that are currently, if you have a challenge getting onto Route 20, you're probably going to experience another 4 or 5 seconds of additional delay at full build out of this project if no mitigation is done at those locations. So with that as sort of the backdrop, this is where the two projects kind of mingle. The site development project and the MassWorks project go hand in glove with each other. The MassWorks project, and just give you a quick primer on that, the town in concert with the developer approached the state and said, listen, we have a project here that's going to create jobs, create opportunities and housing. Will you work with us to provide us some funding for some of the infrastructure needs of the project, specifically the access along Route 20? And will you help us not only do that, but make sure it meets what MassDOT would like to see, which is that 4-lane cross-section through this area here. So in November of last year, the state came back, awarded a $3.75 million grant to the town of Shrewsbury, which essentially addresses the issues associated with this project and also plans into the future additional capacity needs for this section of Route 20. Embedded in that is a new traffic signal at Lake Street and all the information that I talked about as far as sight lines and safety issues that were identified in our prior safety study, a consistent 4-lane section with turning lanes at each major intersection along the corridor, consideration of obviously this project, and I mentioned some of the other projects along the area, and the potential for redevelopment of other properties in this area as well. And like I said, the RSA, the roadside safety audit recommendations. The schedule for the MassWorks project is that the 25% design, which is the preliminary engineering design, which is this document right here on the table, will be submitted in the next couple of weeks to MassDOT for their formal review. We've had a number of different meetings. We met with the town last Tuesday with the state to go over the plans. There were no major issues that were identified, so that project is ready to be submitted and started to be reviewed. If we stay on schedule, and we hope to, those plans will be finalized and submitted in the spring of next year, with construction slated to start in the summer of next year, keeping things moving here. Completion of the project would likely be spring, early summer of 2021, which meshes perfectly with this project's opening date. What are the roadway improvements along this corridor? Now, I mentioned earlier that it's a project for this section of Route 20. It essentially runs from Flint Pond, the bridge over Flint Pond, about 3,300 feet, almost 2/3 of a mile, up past Puritan Street in its entirety. It includes, in the immediate vicinity of the project site's up here to the top part of the screen. It includes the signal down here at Lake Street and the main site driveway. It includes pedestrian crossings and accommodations throughout this area. And it also includes what's called buffered turn lanes. So normally at an unsignalized intersection, say on Route 9, where traffic volumes are going at about 30, 40 miles an hour at most, you have turn lanes that are separated from the main line and as a driver, you're able to sort of turn without worries of somebody flying by you and hitting you. In this particular case here, the state has identified this as a higher speed corridor, so turn lanes we need to make a little bit safer. So what we're providing is a 2-foot buffer between the main line. You'll have 2 feet of buffer of striped out area. Then you'll have your turn lane, and then another 2-foot buffer facing the oncoming traffic. So you'll be separated, you'll be well separated from the mainline traffic as it's going by you and you're looking to turn. So that's inclusive of a major turn lane coming into the project site here, a new turn lane coming into Lake Street there. Lake Street will be widened to provide separate right and left turn lanes, as well as a through lane coming into the project site driveway at that location. That'll taper back probably about 350 feet. So you'll have 2 full lanes as you approach Lake Street there. The driveway into the site will be 2 lanes in each direction with a median dividing it. As you come through this section here in front of the project site, we've provided a turn lane for properties on the opposite side of the street for access for them. Again, 2 lanes coming eastbound, a separate turn-off lane to come into the project site driveway, which would be, again, buffered from the main travelway coming into the site. Exiting the site, it's a right turn only. We do not want people turning left out of this driveway, so we've worked with the town's consultant and MassDOT to modify the pork chop island at the end of the driveway here, so that traffic is forced to take a right turn out of it. If you want to go west on Route 9, or you want to go, Route 20, or you want to go to Lake Street, we're asking all drivers to come through the site and do so at the traffic signal there at much safer condition. There'll be a turn lane that will allow folks to turn into the project at this driveway. Again, buffered from the main travel lane and striped out there. In addition to that, and I think probably one of the more unique pieces of the mitigation out here is the provision of what's called a shared use path. It's a 10-foot pathway that's separated from the roadway for the use by bicyclists and pedestrians. That path, unlike a sidewalk, which is like a 5-foot, right on top of the roadway condition, this is actually grass strip and then a 10-foot pathway on the project site frontage that would run essentially from Lake Street to Puritan Street, and then taper back into a more traditional 5-foot sidewalk situation up there. The designers of the Grafton Street intersection are going to be working towards creating and extending that bike path as well, that shared use path that's off of Route 20. We think that's a much safer condition. The state agrees with us, and I think everybody, from a residential perspective and for connectivity to some of the neighborhoods that exist off of Puritan in that area, I think it's a good mix of ability to sort of get people to and from it if they should choose to walk and or bike to the site. This is a little bit more detailed, the intersection look at the Lake Street. I apologize, it's flipped upside down for you, so the project site driveway is now on the bottom of the screen. Lake Street is on the top side. It's a little bit more detailed analysis, but I just wanted to sort of walk you through the traffic signal equipment that's out there today will all be replaced. There's some visibility issues, there's some antiquation, if you will, within the signal itself. This will be fully detected and a fully modernized intersection, which will allow people to understand, allow the signal to understand as people are approaching and departing the intersection, when and how to time the signal more appropriately. There'll be detection underneath the street and what we call dilemma zone protection, or detection, as drivers are coming towards the intersection. A lot of times, if you're going 30 miles an hour, you can stop when you see a red light or you see it start to change. Not a big deal. But when you're traveling 50 or 60 miles an hour and there's a signal in front of you, you want to be able to understand whether or not to stop or not. A lot of drivers try to either go through it, which is not a great thing, or they try to slow down abruptly and try to stop. In this particular case here, we're putting detection well in advance of the intersection so that it will detect as drivers are coming, whether they're slowing down and stopping or whether they're still going at a high rate of speed. And what the signal will allow itself to do is extend that yellow time just a hair, so there won't be green traffic for anybody who's coming on the side street approaches. Again, that's much more modernized than what you have out there today, which is essentially a very low technology in the world of traffic computers system that exists out here. I did mention the shared use path, pedestrian crossings, sidewalks up Lake Street to some extent, and then a continued sidewalk to the existing bridge over Flint Pond. And this is a little bit more of a blow-up of the area. Again, the unsignalized driveway to the project site on the south side here, again, flipped upside down. I apologize for that. You see the turn lane with the buffered separation for trucks or vehicles that want to come into the site and slow down. Again, the right turn movement coming out of the site and the left turn lane that comes into it with that striped out area along the corridor. And you also see the shared use path there. This graphic up here, I know it's almost impossible to read. What it essentially is, it's a cross-section of the roadway. Today, out there, the Route 20 corridor is anywhere from 30 to 50 feet wide. With this proposal, the corridor will end up being closer to 80 feet wide. Sidewalk from curb line to the back of the shared use path. So you're gonna see a significant upgrade to the corridor there from a capacity perspective, and a significant widening of the corridor through this section here, which is what Route 20 is looking for in this area, and it's consistent with the state's plan out there. The land will be donated along the site frontage of this property. It'll be worked out through an easement agreement with the state, so that the traffic can continue to flow on that, and there's no major takings that are required of this. And we've also worked with Selco, the power company, to make sure any utility poles that need to be relocated out here will be done in advance of the project, not after the project. In addition to the project recommendations the mitigation that I just went over here, the project traffic study has a significant amount of TDM, transportation demand management, worked into it. Carpooling, shuttle busing to some extent, working with the Council of Aging to get folks to and from the development for shopping opportunities, making sure that there are carpooling opportunities for the residents as well as the employees at the site. It's outlined in the traffic study. I mentioned the Route 20 right-of-way and easements that would be donated. We have been working with the WRTA, the transit agency out here. One of the things that they don't have is any service in this area of Shrewsbury. They do see the opportunity, however, and we did have a nice conversation with them. Should development continue to happen down here, they're absolutely interested in shifting around some services. One of the things that we talked about was bringing a shuttle service into this site, or I shouldn't say a shuttle service, but a bus line into this site and then up Lake Street if the demand started to, peak up. There was a lot of excitement about that, and they're gonna take a wait-and-see attitude from their perspective as to how this project moves forward. They're not gonna do it in advance, but they did say that they're interested in sort of following this project and other developments that may happen out here. I did talk a little bit in a traffic study about a traffic monitoring program. So post-occupancy, traffic studies are well and good until the time that they're actually opened up, the stores and the developments are opened up and traffic starts generating in different directions and everything that was designed doesn't really work. In this case here, we're confident in the traffic study and the results of what was put into it. So much so that we're willing to put a very detailed traffic monitoring program in place here. 6 months after the initial opening, 12 months after the initial opening, and then on an annualized basis, once every year for a period of 5 years. The applicant is willing to go back out and monitor the traffic intersections and the opportunities and the traffic patterns that have resulted as part of this project. If there are, and this is a little bit different than some developments, if there are issues associated with the distribution of traffic, the generation of traffic, the applicant will come back and work with the town and the state to address those issues. So if there are concerns, if all of a sudden an intersection that we thought was going to operate really well is not operating well, and there's some reason behind that, we will work with the town and the state to actually do that, and we're willing to put that into our conditions of approval here. This is something that actually came out of the discussion with the peer reviewer, and I'm sure Bob can talk a little bit about that process as well. There's also an additional layer of review that's going to happen with this project. The state environmental process, as I mentioned earlier, the MEPA process, does need to happen with this project. The developer has taken the opportunity to work with the town first to make sure the development program is set, do all the technical studies that you need, and then at a later point in time, go file with the state to obtain their environmental permits. One of the major elements of that is a traffic movement permit, a traffic access permit. So we'll be working with MassDOT, once we get the development program finalized, and hopefully you're in agreement with it. We'll work with them to develop a more extensive plan that will actually work into the city of Worcester as well. I know they're concerned, or they have some questions about some intersections over there. We want to make sure that those are addressed as well as part of that process. I assume at some point tonight, you're gonna ask your peer review consultant to come up and give you his thoughts here. But we did offer a response to the MDM's comments. They issued a comment letter to us on the 15th of August. We went through it, we worked with the site engineer to evaluate many of the questions that were raised in it. A lot of the things that we feel are addressed, and I hope Bob agrees with us, is the traffic gathering, the traffic impacts, and the general project impacts of the project on the local streets are where we seem to be generally comfortable with. There were more detailed comments, as I mentioned, about a more robust traffic monitoring program, so the one I just outlined to you represents and reflects that. There were questions about the timing of the MassWorks grant and the development and occupancy of this site. Should one of them get held up or one of them accelerate faster than the other? We've made a commitment to make sure that the MassWorks roadway project is in place prior to occupancy as part of this project. We don't want this project to accelerate. If that project starts to delay, try to, open it up without the roadway improvements in place. So that's one of the commitments that we have. Should an opportunity or something like that happen, we would then commit to coming back to the board to outline what temporary mitigation actions we could go through as we work towards finalizing the MassWorks project. There were some questions about connections to surrounding developments. So one of the things that we did was we wanted to outline and highlight the connections on the shared use path and extending it all the way to Puritan Street. The driveway design, making sure that folks who want to turn right out of the project do so, and that folks who want to try to fake a right turn and turn left onto Route 20 aren't able to do that physically. So we're working that into the plan. Parking layout and discussion is something that we wanted to spend a little bit of time with the peer review consultant looking at. And then how vehicles circulate interior to the site was something that they also asked us to look at. We've given MDM some responses to those comments, and we look forward to hearing. Hopefully he's comfortable with the majority, if not all of the responses that we've made there. What are the next steps? I think I take more than 15 minutes, so I apologize for that. We want to work with a peer review consultant and this town staff to make sure that vehicle access maneuverability on the site is designed and is comfortable for you folks. Fire department has echoed our claim that their access is suitable throughout the site, and that any internal driveway movements and pedestrian connections are satisfied from the questions of the staff and the reviewer. And as I mentioned earlier, we want to continue to work with MassWorks and MassDOT to make sure that those improvements and any suggestions that come out of this process are worked into that design as we move forward here. Making sure, again, that the construction timing and sequencing of this project are done well. The one other element of this project that I do think is worth mentioning, more MassWorks than this project. There was some discussion at the town level with town staff about Puritan Street itself, and what the issues that street is facing on a regular basis right now with the amount of cut-through traffic that is using Route 20 to get over to Grafton Street and bypass the busy intersection in front of the truck stop. We've made the commitment as part of and work with MassDOT to assure that this happens. Should the town ask us to do something more physical at that location, whether it be right turn in, right turn out, cul-de-sac, there's a number of different options that are, doable. That would be worked into the overall mitigation plan. We, as this development, don't want to influence that process. We want that to come from the neighborhood and from the town. Whatever that decision is, if they like the cut-through traffic, we can leave it there. If they want to clean it up a little bit, we can help out with that. If they want to shut it off completely, again, we can work that angle as well. But we'll definitely work that into the final plan. So with that, I'm done with my presentation. Like I said, probably a few more minutes than 15, but I wanted to make sure I got all the issues and topics on the table for you folks here. So if you have any additional questions, I'm happy to answer them. If you want to hear from your peer review consultant, that's your prerogative.
How about the rest of you?
Thank you.
Yes and no?
I'd like you to consider 6-foot sidewalks rather than 5. I find 5 don't work on a busy street like that.
So again, I'm more than happy to consider that. Again, in front of this project site,
Work with Bernie on
yep,
that.
in front of this project site, I'll remind you that there's a 10-foot shared use path that will go through that area. But in areas that we have just sidewalks provided, I'll look into the 6-foot option, and I'll work with Bernie and making sure that, and Jeff Howland, your DPW engineer, to make sure that that's considered.
Part of the job.
Yeah. Regarding the Lake Street impacts at that main intersection with the Route 20, I know down the road, Beale School is going to be there, and I'm sure with 280 plus units here, there'll be a lot more traffic traveling up north, the Lake Street, as well as maybe from east and west also the turns, right and left turns to Lake Street. Have you taken into consideration the additional traffic that may be generated because of the Beale School?
Not specifically as a result of the school. What we did do is, like I mentioned earlier, we increased the traffic volumes in general throughout the study area by 7% with the intent of capturing developments like that and opportunities like that. If there's a specific concern about the intersection at Lake Street and Route 20, I'm more than happy to, work with Bernie and try to figure out what the impacts likely would be and confirm that the intersection's designed to accommodate those additional trips. I'm confident that it will be, but making sure that the pedestrian environment and the vehicular movements in and out of there are accommodated in that design should be, I'm more than happy to take a look at that as well.
Yeah, I think it won't be just that 1% that you are including every year, Once this school opens, I think the traffic trips will be a lot more from that context, You mentioned the modernized traffic signal at Lake and right in front of the supermarket. Have there been any other intersections where they have right now that kind of modernized lighting system?
Oh, they're all over the place.
Like in Shrewsbury, for example.
Yeah, so I'd go to Lyman Street in Westboro, on Route 9. You've got a pretty high-speed corridor out there. That intersection was just redone. And I know that the traffic equipment out there was all redone as well. So that's a good example of some of the more high-tech, modernized traffic signal equipment on a high-speed roadway and how that sort of addresses it. You probably wouldn't notice the differences as a standard buyer watching traffic flow through it, but you will definitely, it takes into account those higher speeds and certainly the congested periods of day and trying to balance traffic flow through it. If you're familiar with that intersection, what it used to be and what it is now, you know that the intersection operates a lot better than it did when it had the older antiquated equipment out there.
Does anybody, I'd like to hear from our peer reviewer.
I would just like to also
Sure.
echo my sentiment about Lake Street. I know Lake Street's probably the biggest area of concern for the whole, to me, and, living in that neighborhood and I work in the neighborhood where Whole Foods is, and I've seen the traffic, that was the biggest, I think, area of concern for the Whole Foods project was the traffic down there. And I think that has gone very, very smoothly. It looks, when I saw the renderings of what the turn lanes were gonna look like and stuff like that, down there, it's gone very smoothly. I think more smoothly than anyone could have imagined it's gone.
On Route 9.
On Route 9, without question. And I would be the first one to criticize it if it didn't, believe me. I think it's gone very smoothly. So I understand now the technology of new traffic systems and stuff. I still am concerned about the Lake Street intersection. It's already a disaster to begin with. I don't really know what other direction we can go in to make sure that it's going to get better, even with the amount of, I like the turn lanes and, the widening of it and stuff, but I don't really know how we can ensure that it's going to be better than it is now, even without Whole Foods being there. I understand there's gonna be more traffic. That comes with the territory, obviously, but I think most people's concern would be that intersection, more than anything else of the whole overall project.
And to that point, it's one of the reasons why we said in our traffic monitoring effort post-occupancy, we would come back and work with the town if something happened out there in the state that was not what we expected, to address some of those issues and some of those concerns.
Okay, yeah, that's, I think that's everyone's main concern is the Lake Street intersection. I think it's terrible now. We definitely don't want it to be worse.
Yep.
Especially for those and again, I live in that neighborhood, so I understand. It's bad now, so just, if that's one area of concern. That's all I have.
Yes, Mel?
Okay, is, this intersection gonna remain an F?
Oh, no, what we're looking to do is improve that intersection so it would operate at a level of service C or better, in fact, yeah. The additional lanes that exist out there that we're adding, the turn lanes, both on Lake Street as well as our project site, will improve that intersection significantly over what you see out there today.
It's definitely antiquated, I agree.
Yep.
You couldn't get more of an antiquated
I just-
intersection
I just hope we're not blowing smoke at it, because it's a very difficult intersection. It's not just a two-way intersection.
Yep.
I think with the two turn lanes and the straight lane going across into the project, I think that alone is gonna help it tremendously.
Okay.
Just from my experience of seeing what I see all the time at Whole Foods, like what's been done down there, and everyone was up in arms, and rightfully so. You know, you had Spags, and then it went away, and now you have this big project back there, and everyone was really upset, but there's really never any traffic down there. It was done very, very, very well, and this looks very similar to it, to be honest with you.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay. Could I ask our peer reviewer to give us his impression?
Good evening, Robert Michaud of MDM Transportation Consultants, based in Marlborough, Massachusetts, and I'm very pleased to hear that you're happy with the Whole Foods project, because our firm was very much involved with that. So this project, as is the trend in redeveloping parcels like this, really is a village-type concept. And we expect will function very similarly to places like the Whole Foods Lakeway Commons. And in my most recent experience in other communities, Woburn, South Bay, that have these types of developments, we see a very common trend in internally captured trip activity, right? People who are living here are also shopping there, et cetera. So in the course of our review, we spent time looking at the actual empirical evidence of how these types of places work, and what they estimate in their studies it will generate for traffic. And I think they've done certainly a consistent and thorough and professional job at estimating that. I think it's consistent with our own experience with these types of mixed-use facilities, village-type concept facilities. So from the technical standpoint and what we've conducted for a review, we've corroborated what they've shown for analysis results, their trip estimates, where traffic would be going to or from, in a general sense. We think that that was done to a professional standard. We did challenge the consultant to look at a so-called gravity model to ensure that the assumptions of how people would be traveling to the property, particularly for the larger retail component, the supermarket in particular, relative to the other competing uses, right? So we've got Price Jumper, we've got Shaw's, we've got Trader Joe's, Whole Foods, there's a lot of other competing areas. The outcome of that exercise, we agree with, would show that there's a slightly higher orientation to the Worcester and Millbury side, and perhaps a little bit higher on the Lake Street side, but not to a point that presents a material change in what they've originally estimated an impact to be. So we're comfortable that, as Mr. Nagy would point out, the sensitivity analysis was appropriately done, and it confirms that there's ample capacity to support what's being proposed here. Specifically at the Lake Street intersection, we know that that's a high crash location. We also know that this applicant, through their work, has already done a road safety audit of that location to identify specific measures that would make it a safer intersection, and it has incorporated those features into the design that they've presented, right? So we're comfortable that what people are experiencing today for operations is going to be a much different and safer experience when everything's built. So the technical findings are that the study itself was done to a proper standard. We then also focused our attention on two other aspects of the project, and that is the site access and circulation aspects of it. You know, clearly, there's a very important interface between the state-funded project and what they're intending for access for the property. That needs to be and is being closely coordinated. And I think the timelines that Rob Nagy had pointed out are reasonable timelines for completion. So we expect, within reason, that the opening of the facility, whether partial or whole, will be generally aligned with when the state would complete the Mass Works component. However, and this speaks to what we had suggested for monitoring, traffic and transportation monitoring, we want to ensure that if there is a scenario under which the site is ready before the off-site improvements are completed, that is evaluated to determine how much, if any, of the development can open safely without creating a safety or a traffic congestion problem at any one of the locations that they're cited. And I believe that the applicant has committed to a interim operations plan and an evaluation at time of opening, right, prior to occupancy, to determine what portion, whole or in part, could be supported with what infrastructure exists at that time. The second component of the monitoring would focus on the actual performance of the facility. We know that specific tenants, particularly Demoulas is very, very popular, may generate, in certain cases, above an industry standard. Certainly, there may be a novelty factor in the initial opening of the store. So while we think that the estimated impacts are reasonably quantified, we think it's prudent to go out and actually measure the performance. You know, how much traffic is actually being generated? Is it more than what you projected, and if so, how much more? Secondly, are the patterns of that traffic consistent with what you've evaluated? Is 25% of the residential traffic going up Lake Street, or is it more? Is there a higher orientation of supermarket trips from the east or the west, right? So those patterns really need to be measured because they really factor into how the signals will actually perform, right? So the monitoring program will not only look at the volumetrics and the performance of volumes, but also the patterns. And another component of that monitoring we would suggest should include the safety aspect, meaning are the driveways, the access points in particular, functioning in a way that's safe and consistent with the intended design. That specific piece of the monitoring speaks to the easterly driveway, the unsignalized driveway, which in its originally conceived form would physically allow someone who wanted to make a left turn to do so, rather uninhibited. And I believe that the applicant understands the concern, and they have in fact discussed that with DOT and are in the process of modifying the design to include a more restrictive driveway. The particular concern is that if you live in the units on the easterly side of the development and you want to get west, ideally, you'd want them to go traveling through the parking field, eventually to the signal to make a left, where, depending on the time of day, may be awfully tempting to make an easy left turn early in the morning or in the middle of the day, et cetera. And that, in our view, is not safe and is not appropriate on a high-speed road at the foot of a hill. So we look forward to seeing that particular design, and I think DOT would be genuinely concerned and would ensure that that is designed properly as well. So back to the monitoring would look at the patterns, and to the extent illegal left turns are happening, for instance, which have related to crashes, the safety aspect, those would be documented in a post-occupancy study, and to the extent those were issues, they would need to be addressed. And there would be countermeasures that would need to be considered by the applicant to address that. Are those likely? We hope not, but that is the purpose of the monitoring. Other aspects, I don't need to go into detail as it relates to site circulation. Many changes were made that reflect fire department, police department, public works, engineering comments, our comments. The most significant changes, and we think that they're appropriately designed at this point, would be an extension on the easterly driveway of the median so that left turn movements into the residential component were not occurring very close to where the driveway is. So there's a restrictive element there that will encourage folks to travel deeper into the property before they attempt to make left turns. And that feature is also designed, in our understanding, to accommodate emergency vehicle access nonetheless, which was a request of the fire department. From the pedestrian perspective, the applicant has also committed to designing striping and markings within the property that would present a so-called shoulder area along portions of the internal roadway to augment the sidewalk systems, right? The physical roadway width at points within the development is some 30 feet wide, which is great for emergency access, by the way, but is more than you really need for standard vehicular flow. And so striping improvements to reduce the physical dimension of the marked lanes, travel lanes, and to provide a little more buffer between the curb and those lanes, i.e. the shoulder, is something that we understand the applicant is willing to do, and we think it makes sense. From a parking perspective, we had requested an update to reflect the most current standards that were issued by the Institute of Transportation Engineers, the ITE. The applicant has calculated the parking demand on that newer standard, which was recently released, and we find that there's about a 10 to 15% reserve in parking spaces as a general outcome of that exercise. We think that's appropriate. It provides ample flexibility in how the ebb and flow of parking demands will occur depending on season of year, particularly around busier times of the year like Thanksgiving for the supermarket. The applicant nonetheless is also committed to assigning spaces that are furthest from the building for employee use so that frees up the ability for patrons to more readily access the building fronts and the primary parking fields. On the residential side, we were concerned initially that perhaps certain buildings would not have the number of spaces necessary to fully support visitor activity or normal peak parking demands. The applicant has identified additional parking adjacent to residential buildings, particularly on the south side of the development, that are to be held in reserve, and to the extent they're needed based on actual demand would be made available. They are also committed to posting no parking along certain portions of the circulating aisles in cases where the parking ratios are closer to 1.5 than more, and we think that is appropriate. That's really the upshot of our assessment, that things were done to a reasonable standard. There is ongoing coordination with DOT. The most important outcome of this from a condition standpoint, in our view, would be the monitoring component and the interim operations plan to the extent physical improvements are not established along Route 20 before the opening would want to occur. And I'd be glad to answer any specific questions that the board has.
Does anyone on the board have any
For
questions?
the moment, I'm fine.
Okay.
Yeah, could you just speak to, in the planning department's comments, highway and engineering, the police department, in your own comments, you noted the 2 four-way intersections on the westerly driveway.
Right.
And suggested that a mini roundabout would be appropriate to consider there and might help ease the traffic concerns. Since that was sort of flagged by all the different parties, could you just discuss that a little bit?
Yes, modern roundabout design, which is usually an element that has an outside diameter dimension of about 180 feet or so, maybe a couple hundred feet, are becoming very common in these types of developments. In fact, they're preferred design elements because they are a little more pedestrian friendly, and they tend to, they don't require that you stop technically. You know, they're slower moving elements that can really enhance circulation. And we did discuss that with the applicant at an internal working session here at the town. We understand that there are certain constraints that would preclude the effective design of roundabouts on the westerly side of the project. What that really means is that the first point at which you have a four-way intersection is so close to where the signal is that there may be some undue influence between what's happening from a queuing perspective from the signal and where that roundabout is located. If you look at examples in Westboro, for instance, where the Chick-fil-A is, the Westboro Speedway Plaza, that is a roundabout feature that is conceptually something that we've asked the applicant to take a look at, and the town has been interested as well. That particular example is set far enough away from Route 9 that it is not susceptible to vehicle queue influences the way that this particular location would be influenced. The second four-way location that's further into the property is proximate to where the probably busiest, corner of the entire plaza is, which is the Demoulas supermarket. You've also got retail on the other side. The constraint there, as we understand it, it would be drainage related in part. The applicant has worked through ways to detain and meter drainage within the property that would cause some complications in how you'd actually need to design a roundabout at that location. That location is far enough into the project, though, that once you get beyond it, you've got a much lighter traffic volume condition, right? You've got all the residential. So the benefit of having a roundabout there is less than other locations of the site. So I think the applicant has in fact considered that, and in our understanding has other plazas where they would, as a preferred design component, like to have roundabouts. They've done them at other plaza locations. They just don't really fit in neatly in this particular site for those reasons. You know, bless you, and I think, you know, perhaps as you look at the easterly side of the site, and I'm going by memory here,
Mr. Chairman, sorry, may I interrupt? Do you happen to have I was about to say, 'cause I have it on my laptop, the plan we could show?
yeah, that would be
I think that'd be good to have a reference for the audience, for the board, and just about everyone.
Which one? 4A.
Yep.
All right, so.
Bob, do you want to stand up maybe and just point out the, sorry,
I can do that.
or one of you?
can, okay, thank you.
So, Lake Street traffic signal, the first roundabout location that we considered as part of this project would be here. Mr. Michaud actually hit the nail on the head with that. The queues that do come back from here would influence that location. It's just too close to the signal. The second operational one could be here that we looked at. The heavy flow of traffic through this one would actually have people going 3/4 of the way around and into the project site here. Not a whole lot of traffic coming down from the residential, not a whole lot of traffic coming from the retail on that side. But you can see the drainage, structures in this area, which are needed for this site. It's already at a high impervious level for what we're trying to accommodate out here. So the footprint that's needed for a roundabout at this location, if you think of truck traffic coming through here, is problematic. If it was just a pedestrian, if it was just a passenger vehicle one that's like the one over at Chick-fil-A in Westboro, that just is for passenger vehicles. Truck traffic is actually shunted over to the Otis Street entrance to that plaza. So this one would be bigger than that and would take up a lot bigger of a footprint here with impervious surface, and it would be problematic from a drainage perspective, as well as our ability to infiltrate groundwater back into the ground. The other one that we looked at would be over here on the far side of the site. Topographically over here, there's problems with the land. This is, I believe this is up high, down low, sorry, down low, this is up high. So to build that same footprint over here would require significant retaining walls. It would have the same influence on the detention basins that are proposed out here, in addition to influencing pedestrian connectivity as well. So we've got an opportunity with this typical standard four-way intersection to get people into the project from the residential area over here. The bigger footprint would require them to go well out of their way, because you don't want them walking through the roundabout there. I will say, we've worked with Market Basket for several years now. They do prefer roundabouts, and in this particular case here, they actually asked us to design one or two into this feature, and when we came back with the information, it didn't merit placement out here. But it is something that is getting worked into many more designs as times go by.
Right, Mr. Chair, I failed to mention one other comment, and I think it's in process of being evaluated, and that is the Purinton Street intersection. And particularly, our suggestion that it would be ideal to try to make some accommodation for pedestrian bicycle connection, if you will, between the Orchard Meadows residential community and this site. We think that the mixed-use, multi-use path is going to be a great feature, that it should be designed to have an appropriate interface with Purinton, and I think it will. But as I've personally walked down Purinton and envisioned whether someone at Orchard Meadows in particular would want to walk here, I came to the conclusion that yes, they'd want to walk here, but Purinton and its layout doesn't really encourage that. It's relatively narrow, there aren't sidewalks, it's not really even marked, very well. So we had suggested, and it may be an outcome of, ongoing discussion with the town, is what features could be provided to encourage, enhance, and make that connection more attractive. That could be a combination of enhanced markings, sharrows on the pavement surface, cutting back, vegetation along the roadway edges, not necessarily sidewalk formally, but ideally a sidewalk on one side of the road. That goes hand in hand with what Rob Nagy had mentioned as an evaluation of the cut-through traffic concern. And we just today have received some updated count information that would at least give some indication as to what that cut-through traffic is volumetrically. How that gets handled, I haven't given a lot of thought to. It's certainly subject to an ongoing conversation. But I think that the outcome of any, improvements should really focus on trying to make that pedestrian and bicycle connection worthy, to get people out of their cars to be able to walk here. It's a poster child for a development that should be encouraging that type of walking activity, and that's a logical location to try to do that.
I know we didn't talk too much today, but, and I think you're in negotiation with the town in terms of the transportation for the students. And has that been reviewed at all by you?
Meaning school buses and the
School
operations?
buses, or how transportation for students?
Yeah, I know that during our discussions with the applicant, it was preferred that there be a way to have buses ideally processed within the property. There may be state law that inhibits that, and that the applicant was going to be evaluating that and researching it. And to the extent that is possible, I think the concept would be to have that bus stop located along a pullout on the easterly side, the left side of this drawing, near the residential building complex, right? That would be the logical location to have that. Alternatively, if school bus operations were confined to Route 20, the concept would be that school bus pick up at the easterly driveway within the confines of what is shown as an exclusive right turn lane, so that they're off of the main travel lanes of Route 20. Notwithstanding, people still have to stop, right, for the school bus, but at least students could be loading from curbside in a safer location than next to a high-speed through lane. So I'll defer to the applicant and what progress they've made.
I know that that's something that's not vetted out completely yet, but I would like to have some sort of a kind of temporary, if one thing doesn't work, this is where we're planning on having the pickup happen. I know, like the VRTA, I believe you had mentioned, is potentially, it would make sense to maybe piggyback on that.
Right. So where we are on that is by evaluating and having the building that you can just see on the edge of the left, you might recall, is actually the rental office and community center. So it's serviced by a parking lot that you can see just above it that will obviously not have much use early in the morning or mid-afternoon when the buses are using. So that's really the preferred location because it's totally outside the flow of traffic. There's an area that can get outside of the lane of travel for the interior driveway. We haven't found anything, and we have to share some information with the town, and they probably want to share with town council. We haven't seen anything in the law that says you can't do it, but we also then have to go the next step and look at what the contractual agreement is between the bus provider and the town, and make sure that it also, that may change when the provider changes in some fashion, because it's certainly a risk for a provider that has to be addressed in some fashion. The owner of the site and the applicant are prepared to allow that use if the bus is willing to do it. If that doesn't work, then that same location for students to congregate out of the elements, because we can build that building with, if nothing else, an exterior portico to keep them out of the elements. But even more importantly, a place for parents to do drop-off or pickup by having a parking area there, the area that Mr. Nagy pointed to before, that right-hand lane. Particularly in the morning, that works well, because that should have a very light traffic of people turning into the site from that direction, since they already passed the Lake Street entrance, and they're probably, if they're going to the stores, that's what they're gonna use. And if they're going to the residences, traffic, most of it's flowing out of the site. And in the afternoon, it may be not as good, but it's a pretty short period, and it's out of the flow of traffic, so I think it can work well.
Can I just make an observation? So Avalon, up the road, closer to Christmas Tree Shop or Dunkin' Donuts, they must have the same issue there. I wonder what their solution is to the bus stop issue, because again, if the buses can't drive into Avalon, is it called Avalon? Is that what it's called?
The one, yes, next to the Dunkin's and the,
yes.
Swenson Granite, I think. it is,
Correct,
yeah.
yes. They must have the same problem as this. They're on Route 20, and if buses aren't allowed to drive into that project, where do those kids get on the bus?
Yeah, so, and I could speak to some degree about that. We conducted a road safety audit at the Route 9 and South Street intersection, and we know one of the issues at that location is that buses already stop on Route 9, right? They don't go into that property. When they're picking up or dropping off, they also pull around onto South Street in close proximity to the signal, and that actually creates periodically a backup from behind the bus onto Route 9. So I believe that the town was going to pursue discussions with that particular landowner to determine the feasibility of having bus service through the property. That currently does not occur, but for the same.
I think we're talking about two different projects. We're not talking about Route 9 and South Street. I'm talking about the Avalon on Route 20.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Up closer to
Yes.
the Northborough line.
Correct, right, near the Sportsplex, New England Sportsplex, and right.
So that they would have essentially the same issue that you guys are having.
Yeah, and that's a common issue along this sections of either Route 9 or Route 20, is that state law certainly requires that anyone, traveling behind or for a bus, when it stops, has to stop, but it's not ideal to have that happening on a high-speed, high-volume road. So to the extent you can bring that off-road, the better.
Absolutely.
And I think that is the objective of this particular applicant, and the town is as interested in seeing that happen as anyone, subject to, what Mr. Donahue had just mentioned, the proper research.
Okay, Mel?
Steve, could I ask for a short recess?
Sure.
Thanks.
You don't mind, we're gonna take a 5-minute recess? Thank you.
happens.
could please clarify a couple of points?
Yep.
Thank you.
Again, wanted to just walk through a few things on the site plans based on the questions that we heard. This is the residential portion to the rear. The commercial section is down here in the front. Just wanted to call, a question was asked about 6-foot sidewalks.
Yes.
In this section here, the entire ring road is ringed with a 6-foot sidewalk through this area here. We've also included for speed as well as accessibility issues, raised crosswalks throughout, just in these two locations as you enter the residential area is a nice transition reminder that, hey, listen, you're driving into a residential area, not a commercial area. Be a little bit aware, it's a raised crosswalk. You'll end up going, anything faster than 20 miles an hour and you'll feel it in your car.
Before you switch from that.
Yep.
Good evening, my name's Roy Smith. I work for RJ O'Connell and Associates with the Site Civil Engineers. One thing that Bob mentioned, we narrowed up the roadway. We provided a truck turning, emergency vehicle turning movement plan, and we reviewed that with Deputy Chief Colby. And as we discussed with him, the emergency vehicle turning movements in and out of the residential parking fields wouldn't allow us to narrow up the actual physical driveway, but what we did do is do striping to narrow it up. So we changed the 15-foot lanes to 15-foot lanes to two 12-foot lanes and added a 3-foot shoulder on each side. So we've done that. We also, based on some of the comments from the planning department in Bernie, we added a crosswalk and sidewalk connection here as well. We've modified some of the garages. We've actually deleted one of the garages that was in here because of the parking numbers per residential pod. So this is a 4.5 ratio overall provided in this area. This area, it's kind of tough to see, but what we've done is we've reserved parking. We've got 21 spaces reserved in this back area. We have 25 spaces reserved up in the front area. And those will be built if needed in the future. Regardless of the reserved spaces, with or without the reserved spaces, the residential component it actually exceeds the parking requirements by zoning. It's a 1.6 ratio overall without the reserved spaces. It's a 1.7 with the reserved spaces. And then we can go to the front sheet. What we've also done here is when we met with Deputy Chief Colby, we knew that this intersection was kind of a critical area in how it functions and relates to access to the parking fields, both on the residential side and on the commercial side. So a couple of things that we've done is, and I think Bob mentioned this and Rob mentioned this early in part of their presentation, we extended this median up. But the emergency vehicle access, this has to be a mounted curb. So the emergency vehicles can come in, but they can also take a left and go over that curb, but it will prevent the passenger vehicles from taking a left out. You can only take a right out at this driveway now. So it's basically a one-way out. You can take a right in, but you can't take a left out of that driveway. We've changed the alignment a little bit of this circulation drive. We didn't introduce any pedestrian vehicular conflicts for queuing reasons and safety reasons. The access, one of the comments was to try and provide a pedestrian path over to the pharmacy. Some of the difficulties in that is the grading constraints. The grade of the perimeter roadway is about 6 or 7 feet higher than the grade of the pharmacy. So this is a pretty steep slope. So from an ADA accessibility perspective, we didn't want to do that, and based on that physical constraint, we didn't want to do that. But more importantly, from a safety perspective, we didn't want to introduce vehicular coming in the entrance drive and a pedestrian conflict right off the bat. So we felt that it more appropriate to keep them on the residential side and have one crossing after the main intersection. And obviously, the sidewalks interconnect throughout the commercial and the residential project are all 6-foot wide sidewalks. some of the key aspects going down here, Rob, is we changed the configuration of this. That was a little bit tricky to do because obviously you can see we have a potential off-site detention basin for the Route 20 roadway improvements. But what we've done here is we used to have parking here that backed into this configuration here where it was a right only coming out of the pharmacy where it was going. It was kind of conflicting. So what we've done is we've narrowed that up, and this is a slip right in to the lower parking field, and it gives some relief rather than all the traffic having to come up and go into the front parking field. You can take a slip right in and go in and circulate in the lower parking field where there's more available spaces. By doing that, what we did is we worked with Bob and your peer review consultant and provided a rumble strip to clearly divide that if you're coming down this way, you can only take a right. You can't go up here. There's do not enter signs at the end of those. We've lost about 7 or 8 parking spaces by this configuration, but we think it works better. And I think that's about all.
Okay. Any other questions from the board?
No, I'm all set.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to be heard?
Mindy McKenzie, Precinct 10. I just had a couple of questions. If you could pull back up the slide with the intersection showing Lake and Route 20. I had a question about the queuing and how deep that was.
You want the site?
The-
This
yeah,
one or the,
The one that shows the intersection with the 2 lanes on either side, going into the site development, how much further it goes?
Oh, okay.
Show the one with the parking lot, yeah.
Yep.
So about how many car lengths, I mean, I'm looking at the traffic coming that's southbound on Lake going into the development. About how many car lengths is it till that first left turn?
till that one right there?
I can't see, I mean, you're pointing on.
Oh, I'm sorry. This movement here?
Yes.
You're looking for?
About 10, 15 car lengths, or?
No, it would be less than that. It would probably be more along the lines of, that's a full car length right there, so maybe 6 or 7.
Yeah, I think that that's gonna be a problem, don't you? I mean, I think that people are gonna be backed up onto Route 20.
No, so what?
Possibly through the intersection.
So the concern, and we had the same thought process on this, so you have the opportunity to sort of fill the back of the supermarket lot here, and if that queuing does start to back up here, we have this lane that takes you right past it and into the other driveway that enters into the parking lot there.
Yeah.
So we're aware of that. There's really not a whole lot of traffic that is gonna be opposing that movement coming into the rear of the parking lot, so this will be not fully free flow, but this will be a pretty heavy movement, we suspect, over the course of time. Thinking that the traffic is gonna be released in chunks as a result of the signal down here. So you're gonna have the left turn lane, and if there's, say, 15 or so cars queued up in here, they're all gonna enter the site at the same time. And they'll almost assuredly be able to turn right in without any conflicts coming out. This driveway from here back is the place that we were more concerned about, and we wanted to make sure that any queuing didn't block that intersection. So what we've designed is an intersection here that queues back only to the end of the median that's there, so there won't be any blockage of that intersection back there. So you're gonna have a situation where you can flow in much easier than
So
what I think you're here.
as soon as you get to there, the sensors are gonna trigger the light, is that what you're saying?
We're gonna know when traffic is backed up on this, and again, there's several, cars worth of storage within here. And when it reaches a certain point, it will let the signal know that it needs to change and move traffic out of there.
Okay, but you're telling, and you're also saying that this is the main truck route. So all trucks, it's not like, for example, the loop where you've got, or as you mentioned, the speedway where you've got a separate trucking lane.
Yep.
So all trucks are going to be going in through one intersection, that light right there.
Yep.
And you're going to queue all the people that want to take and go westbound through that intersection as well, from the development.
People who,
They can't go westbound through the second entrance.
they can't, correct. We want them to come out this intersection.
Everybody's going to be going that way, the trucks and the westbound.
If you're heading in the westbound direction, correct. You'll be turning left out of this driveway here.
Well, I think I heard you say that the majority was going to be coming from Worcester Millbury, so that would essentially be westbound.
Yep.
So, okay, that's a concern I have. The other thing I wanted to find out, you have two schools going through, you have Coolidge and the New Beale that'll be going through that intersection. The parents will be, or could be going through that intersection, Lake. And I wanted to hear some of the mitigation of that, the difficulty of taking a left out onto Lake to Quincy, or from Quincy out from Lake over, before you get to the intersection on the Quincy / Lake side.
On the Worcester side.
On the Shrewsbury side, as you're going north on Lake,
Okay.
all right? So it's not really part of your development, I get that, but the traffic is part of your development. So you're trying to take from Lake, taking a left onto the, whatever you call it, Quincy Lake, whatever the little triangle is there, that's a real problem, because you're gonna have a lot of new kids, mothers going to Market Basket, whatnot, and that's a hard intersection right now. And with the traffic that you're adding, I just think it's a concern that I have, right? You can't see it because it's not on your diagram, but I'd like to know what you've mentioned, other components that are going to be a part of this discussion as far as fixing the roads and so forth. What is that part of the discussion? Fixing that little parcel, if you will.
Yeah, so there are currently no plans to address that specific parcel that you're talking about. One of the comments that one of the board members made was the schools. We didn't take that into account, the potential new schools and how that might work into this. So it's one of the things that I do want to come back to the board and do a little bit of research before I start offering up.
Well, because you've got 2 lanes going in there, and you actually have, you've got that triangle piece. I don't know if it's too close to a road to put a rotary or anything like that, but that really is, it's gonna be a real bottleneck, because you're gonna have people trying to take a left to get out to, what is the name of that?
Lake Street.
Lake?
Lake onto South Quincy. That's where Lake and South Quincy intersect.
Yes, it's a very challenging for me to get that straight, what you're gonna say, but taking a left out there, and then you've got inflow of, the additional traffic coming from Market Basket. And Market Basket, let's face it, it's a destination, but unlike the Whole Foods development, Whole Foods has, Muzzy and Dewey and other points that you can dissipate the traffic. This has got no other points of traffic to dissipate. You've got one way in to take a westbound turn. And that's, I'm disappointed that there's not a truck delivery area separate or a back entrance. Just my comments, thank you.
Yes, sir.
So a couple of questions. So my name is Prashant Ram on Nelson Point. Earlier you mentioned that there was going to be sidewalks on Lake Street. Can you talk about how far that sidewalk was going to go? That's going to be one thing. The second one, actually there's 2 more. Second one was, if I look at, this diagram's not on the website, is it? This PDF? Because I didn't see it.
The site plans are definitely on the website.
This one is?
Yep.
Okay, sorry, I just didn't see it then.
You can always stop by my office. We can walk through it.
Cool, thank you. The second question was, if I look at this plan compared to what we talked about last time around open spaces, does this plan include the concept around open spaces and how the layout is done for Whole Foods with regards to the parking lots? Because I don't see a ton of trees or anything else, I just see this as parking lots.
Want to talk about landscaping?
Yeah, I think you're referring to like landscape open space?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, pan out.
So we actually, 2 meetings ago, I
Last
think it
meeting.
was it last meeting?
Yeah.
We did a whole section on landscaping already.
Okay.
So they are more than meeting their requirements for, interior for lot coverage and so on, open space requirements. But we did address that, tree types. I think we had a couple questions that we're gonna get in the revised plans about tree, diameters and so on, calipers of trees, so.
I bet that's probably that was probably on the PDF also, right, with the papers that we got?
Yeah, that would all be on it, yep.
Okay, cool. The third thing was, I'd like to echo the concern around traffic, especially around Lake Street and South Quinn segment, and especially when you make that turn, along with after the Beale School opens up, is after the kids get dropped off, are the buses gonna go down, Lake and then South Quinn segment and then around to go park at that parking lot that's already there? If so, that's a ton of traffic. As someone that, again, I've echoed this comments before, as someone that walks on that street, I literally wait for minutes. And I hate to say this, it might be naive to say it's under the 3 or 4 seconds, because it's like, I've stood there for minutes to walk the street.
I think what he had mentioned was 3 or 4 seconds in addition to what you're currently
Addition to-
experiencing.
I'm saying that's naive. That's, again, my opinion. Those are the two that I had so far. Oh, the third one was, when we mentioned the traffic patterns, is there a breakdown of what kind of traffic that they're expecting? Is it just cars, is it trucks, is it buses, et cetera? Because there are USPS trucks that already go through Lake Street, and it's a pain when they go through it, because it's just loud and they speed. And I don't know if this is gonna add this will add additional traffic, and if it's gonna add additional truck traffic, it's just gonna be super noisy on that street as is.
If you want to address the additional truck traffic noise.
Truck traffic noise in and around the development, or?
I think he's talking the Lake Street, South Quincy area.
Well, I guess we can address it as far as it, that may be a path of travel, as it's a permitted path of travel in the town, at the town control road. We can certainly provide to you in detail, if you so wish, I think a more detailed analysis from Market Basket, which I think we did touch on.
If I understand the comment, the UPS traffic truck is not likely to change due to this project, but I think the additional truck traffic servicing the site is probably what he's asking about. So do we have an idea of how much additional truck traffic may be incorporated for daily deliveries and
Sir,
things of that nature?
if I may interrupt, speaking of a previous meeting, maybe of a year or so ago, and I think if Steve could sit on this, he would be able to answer this question more, but I think there was some sort of rule, I don't know if rule is the right word, about truck traffic on South Quincy, when something was, I wish Steve knows the answer to this, about trucks not being allowed to drive down South Quincy. But I could be wrong.
I think that's possible.
Well, I think maybe there's two different issues, one of which we can answer and one of which is probably up to the town. If the town has placed constraints upon truck travel on ways, that's the town's decision, and they can impose that as long as they impose it in an unbiased fashion, so it applies to any type of truck of a certain size, then you can do that. I understood the question to be, you wanted to know beyond you referred to it as United Parcel Service kind of size truck, like a bread truck. Now, beyond that, a tractor trailer, what's the delivery schedule, how often, that type of thing. And we did touch on that in our initial meeting, but rather than me try to remember it and guess, why don't we submit to you in writing a specific example of how a Market Baskets receives its tractor trailer deliveries?
Okay, thank you.
Those are all off-hour, aren't they, Mark?
The vast majority of, but I don't want to say all.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, definitely in the AM. So.
Is there any other questions from the audience? Yes, ma'am.
Question. Debbie Benz, 65 Cortland Grove Drive. I'm in the Orchard Meadows development. Could I see, I came to the first meeting, and at that first meeting, I don't remember seeing an additional entrance and exit from the development from the first meeting. Could I see that on the screen? Could I see the entrance, the unlighted entrance, the one that's?
Yeah, there's two.
And what I guess I'm wondering is how close is that to the right turn onto Purinton?
It's about 1,200 feet away, so it's about a quarter mile away.
Okay, so as we had talked about earlier, somebody had mentioned, Purinton is a very narrow street. And it's one way going up that way. And I'm just wondering if having people coming out that way is going to increase the traffic on Purinton, because it's a cut-through, because nobody wants to stop at Flynn's truck stop lights. So rather than to get onto Grafton Street, people go up Purinton all the time.
The likelihood, in all honesty, is that
It's gonna be
if
increased.
nothing happens on Puritan Street, from a design perspective, there will be a slight increase in traffic associated with this development on it. Which is why I mentioned at the beginning of this, if the neighborhood, working in concert with the town, would like to see some treatment done there, we're happy to work that into the design of this project. And like I said earlier, that could be, you know, cul-de-sacing it so that nobody can come in and out of Puritan onto Route 20, making it right turn in, right turn out, cleaning it up a little bit so that it's a little safer. I think Mr. Michaud,
Yes.
the town's traffic consultant, suggested maybe doing some sidewalks through that area, or maybe some cleared space so people could walk outside of the traveled way. Those are all ideas that I think that have merit. We, as this development, don't want to sort of impose that upon your neighborhood.
Yeah,
We
no,
would like to hear from you.
and I appreciate that,
Yeah, we would like to hear from
frankly.
you what you would like to be.
Frankly.
It's been considered as part of this project.
Okay.
And we just need to get direction from you as to what is comfortable, what you're comfortable with. And
Well,
what would like us to do.
frankly, there is no way that I would walk from Cortland Grove Drive down Puritan to go to the Market Basket.
And
I
if you wanna
just-
live.
I mean, you'd be taking your life into your hands the way it is now. And I don't even know if it could be widened enough or what could be done to make it safer. And, I mean, I'm not gonna carry my groceries home, needless to say. But, I mean, and I do go out and I do walk, so, but I wouldn't consider walking on Puritan,
No,
especially.
I think you'd have to have a lot of takings.
Yeah, and I actually think that there's gonna be way more traffic, maybe than you know, estimate, because people are going to be coming out of that, you know, either one of the two exits from the development. And they're gonna be taking that, Puritan is gonna be like right there, and it's gonna be, we're not gonna bother going to the light, we're just gonna zip down Puritan. So I'm anticipating seeing a significant amount of traffic on Puritan.
Are there any other questions from the audience? Yes, sir.
Sergeant Garland, Lake Street ain't gonna be able to handle that traffic, excess traffic. Is the town gonna end up having to pay to widen Lake Street? You got the school going up there and everything else.
I'm not prepared to answer that question.
Have you been on Lake Street? You know
Yes,
how narrow it is, you know how.
I live in that general
I mean,
area.
Even under the power lines, they put a curb up, made the road real narrow. It doesn't make any sense, and then you wanna add extra traffic to that. Just doesn't make sense to me. I didn't hear nothing about the excess traffic that's gonna be put on Northwood Sigmund Ave or Southwood Sigmund Ave because of this project, or the light at Route 9 on that end. They didn't mention that at all. Those are all problem spots.
I believe the Route 9 intersection is included in the traffic study.
So that's including,
It's actually not specifically included
That
in
one's,
the.
I thought I saw that it was. I
Yeah,
apologize.
no, it's focused on Route 20, Lake Street, but doesn't go as far as that. And I think, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, or during the presentation, the projected impacts are related to mostly the residential traffic traveling up and down Lake Street, and we're looking at somewhere between 40 and 60 new cars an hour driving up and down, which it's tangible, but it's not going to drive the need for another lane on the roadway. I do hear and respect some of the comments that I'm hearing on the South Quinsigamond area, and definitely want to spend a little bit more time focusing on that. But at this point in time, you know, I don't think that there's a concern about adding lanes in that corridor, but certainly addressing some of the issues that may exist out there.
okay, on Route 20, you got it set up that if I was going east and I had to get in one of the businesses across the street, I can get in there. So I'd have to cross the traffic on the westbound side to get in there. Now I want to get out. I'm driving a truck now. I have to turn right, or can I turn left?
You're gonna end up taking a right
Okay.
and going up to the light.
Then where am I going?
U-turn.
There'll be a U-turn at,
That's what you're gonna have to do, unless something changes.
I'm looking to get on,
And if you got a 53-foot truck, you're gonna have a lot of trouble.
right, and how many businesses is that gonna affect? I know there's a container yard there.
Well, maybe it's worth have Mr. Nagy review what his analysis would say would happen on that vehicle.
Yeah, again, we wouldn't certainly restrict a left-turning movement coming out of that. I think from a practical perspective, during busy times of the day, a tractor-trailer truck coming out of one of those driveways would be challenged to turn across, 2 lanes of moving traffic. As I mentioned earlier, we have specifically designed turn lanes for those folks to get off of Route 20 into them. So if there's an opportunity to turn left out of those, it would either happen during off-peak periods or to the point that was made earlier, there'd need to be a situation where they'd have to U-turn, which is no different than what happens today out there. It just would be in a safer situation in many different ways.
It's gonna be a lot more traffic.
But
Now I have to go right. You're gonna put me way out of my way to get up to 140, 290. By truck, unless I go down, well, that's still gonna put me out of the way. South Quincy, North Quincy, past the postal facility, on a 290 down there. Now, if you just want you to know that, North Quincy and South Quincy is where those trucks that are coming in and make the deliveries are gonna be coming.
I'll take it under advisement.
I think it needs a lot more study.
Because I drive truck. I mean, I know that's the best way to get to this development, if you got a truck. You're not gonna be coming from Route 20 down to Worcester, you're gonna be coming off 290.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Anybody else have any additional comments? Okay, I would entertain
No way
a
to put
motion.
a U-turn at that light on South Street where a truck would come down, turn around and go back up.
I don't know the answer to your question.
Because if we, like I say, those businesses there gotta turn right, where are they gonna turn around? And now you're talking, you wanna shut down South Consegment Ave.
Well, we'll discuss this with the planning group, and I'm sure the traffic people have your comments, and they will investigate a little further for you. Thank you. I will take a motion to continue this hearing.
Yes.
I need a little more descriptive than that now.
Move to continue the hearing.
Do I have a second?
To,
Yeah, we gotta be more descriptive, yeah. You wanna try
November
this, Brian?
7th. Yes.
I move that we continue the public hearing at Edgemere Crossing at Flint Pond Site Plan Special Permit, Route 20, to the November 7th, 2019 meeting at 7 PM.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Steve, can you just, the meeting's not over, so.
Excuse me, for those, our next, our next agenda item is proposed zoning bylaw changes. Bernie, would you like to discuss?
Put that off to the next week.
I don't think we
can't.
can.
We cannot.
We cannot.
This is the only public hearing we're having for them.
Thank you, Prana.
Thank you, Brennan.
This meeting's still going on,
Yeah,
so.
excuse me, those
You
of
can
you-
take your conversations outside, we'd really appreciate it. So, Mr. Chairman, the 2 articles for discussion tonight that are going before the, and need this board's recommendations, are Article 7, Article 8, and Article 9. These will be on the warrant for the special town meeting on October 21st. The first one, I was gonna use my computer for it. I believe you guys have the drafts in front of you.
Yes.
If one of you could read it out for me, that would be great. Emily's using my computer because her battery died on her laptop, but,
Give me a
oh
moment.
yeah, you need to read the legal notices. Yes, sir. So never mind, let's go back to that.
Thank you.
Want me to do them all?
For those in the audience that are still here, can you please move your conversations elsewhere? Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, sorry about that, Jay, go ahead.
In accordance with the provisions of MGL Chapter 40A, Section 5, the Shrewsbury Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Thursday, October 3rd, 2019, at 7 PM in the Selectmen's Meeting Room at the Richard D. Carney Municipal Office Building, 100 Maple Avenue, Shrewsbury, Massachusetts, regarding proposed amendments to the Shrewsbury zoning bylaw as follows. Article, to see if the town will vote to amend the zoning bylaw of the town of Shrewsbury relative to Section 2 definitions to amend the definition of gross floor area or to take any other action in relation thereto. Article, to see if the town will vote to amend the zoning bylaw of the town of Shrewsbury relative to section 2 definitions in section 6, table 1 use regulation schedule to insert a definition for contractor's yard and contractor storage yards contractors' yards and storage yards in the definition section of the zoning bylaw and to amend the language for contractors' yards and storage yards in the use regulation schedule or to take any other action relation thereto. Article, see if the town will vote to amend the zoning bylaw of the office of Town of Shrewsbury relative to section 9, Board of Appeals and Special Permit Granting Authority to delete references to the chairman of the planning board serving on the Board of Appeals or to take any other action in relation thereto. Complete text, where applicable, may be seen during regular business hours in the office of the Planning and Economic Development Department, the offices of the town clerk at the municipal office building at 100 Maple Avenue, and the Shrewsbury Public Library at 609 Main Street. Sir, may I ask for a 2-minute recess?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. We have a 2-minute recess. Oh, 1-minute recess?
We said two.
We have to go the full 2 minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Good job.
I said one.
Gonna met resistance, you didn't know.
Yeah, that's just it. You never know what's gonna happen out
On
there.
the plus side, I found the articles that I had a copy, so.
Sorry to delay this longer.
That's okay.
Only got about 30 seconds, we're good to go.
This is all generally just cleanup stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is pretty simple. All right, I'm gonna say it's been 2 minutes.
Okay.
Resume your meeting, please.
All right. So, Article 7 is the first article. This is related to, last year, we removed the requirement that the chair of the planning board also serve as a member of the zoning board of appeals. It was discovered later that we had missed a small phrase in a different part of the zoning bylaw. Simply, it currently states members shall be appointed for 2-year terms as of April 1st. This is regarding the Board of Appeals of each year, except for the chairman of the planning board, who shall be appointed annually. So we are just proposing here to delete from except for the chairman of the planning board, who shall be appointed annually, because that is no longer applicable. Has been on the books for a long time, so don't be surprised in another year or two we find another reference to it, but for now, we're getting rid of that one. Article 8. This one is so to amend the definition of gross floor area. When we did the changes this past spring at annual town meeting to introduce the floor area ratio for duplexes, it came to our attention in the planning department that the gross floor area definition was a little inadequate. It was kind of outdated and not very specific. So this is an attempt to make it, kind of bring it more up to date and make it more specific. So when we are calculating floor area ratio, and that not just for duplexes, there are other instances when we need this definition to be pretty tight. We've introduced new language. So the new language, I'm just going to read it out really quick, if you could indulge me for a minute. The sum of the floor area of all principal and accessory buildings equal to or greater than 200 square feet in size, whether or not habitable. Floor area measurements shall be taken within the perimeter of the outside walls of each building without deduction for attached or detached garage space, enclosed porches, hallways, stairs, closets, thickness of interior walls, columns, atria, and other vertical open spaces, but not including any space where the floor-to-ceiling height is less than 6 feet. That last indication, that last phrase about being less than 6 feet, think of your attic, right? You go into most walk-in attics, they have your pitched roof. You would draw 6 feet up a box, and anything outside that 6 foot, that biggest height would not be included in it. So you draw the box, and that would be your volume you're measuring. So that is the new definition. Does anyone have any questions about that? concerns, recommendations, or?
Nope.
At first blush, I'd like to think about it.
Okay.
I just have problems with change.
Okay. We'll give it some thought, if you will, and we'll move on to the next one, Article 9. In this case, we've had the use for contractors' yards and storage yards on the books for a long time in the use table, but the town's never had a definition for it. What this would do is, we kind of have this kind of squiggly definition, kind of half definition in the use table. It would remove that and just keep the use, keep it clean, just say contractors' yards and storage yards. Nothing else in the use table there is changing in terms of uses and districts, stays exactly the same. What we do is add a definition, and I've worked hand in hand with the building department on this, the zoning enforcement officer, to make sure she was on board and building was comfortable with this, because they'd be the ones also interpreting it day to day as different applicants come in, and we get them quite a bit, believe it or not. So I'm just gonna, again, quickly read the definition. I know it's getting late, but I think we need to do our due diligence. Storage yards operated, so this is the definition, it would be contractors' yards and storage yards, and this would be in the definition section. Storage yards operated by or on behalf of a contractor for storage of equipment, vehicles, or other materials commonly used in the individual contractor's type of business. Storage of scrap materials used for repair and maintenance of contractors' own equipment, and buildings or structures for uses such as offices and repair facilities. All operations shall be such as to confine to the premises dust, noise, odors, and other objectionable effects. All materials and equipment shall be screened from public view and abutting properties. In essence, these are the standards we've been trying to hold people to anyway, or certainly the zoning enforcement officer has. This would codify it by putting it in the definition, so we'd be able to point to it and say, this is the standard that we're trying to hold people to, and this is what we mean. Any questions about that?
That was pretty straightforward.
So what we're looking for is, I think we should probably have a motion on each article, Article 7, 8, and 9. This is not, obviously, as always with our zoning articles, this is for Tim, this is new on the board. The board's role is to offer their recommendations. So the motion would be to recommend the article. We're not approving it, we're not adopting it, that's the job of town meeting. So on October 21st, the town meeting would hear these, and I would present them, so.
Should we do a motion for Article 7?
Yeah, I move that we amend, is it Article 7?
Recommend. Yeah, recommend.
Just recommend Article 7.
No, I get that, but is it warrant Article 7?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
But it amends Section 9 of the zoning bylaw.
You just need to say a motion to recommend Article 7.
Yes.
Yeah, it's, is it amending? Yes, it's amending it.
Yes, okay. I move that we recommend Article 7 to the special town meeting.
Do I have a second?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
We have Article 8.
Article 8. Again, I move that we recommend Article 8 to the upcoming special town meeting.
All in favor?
Do we have a second?
I have second, rather.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Article 9?
Yep.
I move that we recommend Article 9 to the upcoming special town meeting.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just clean up stuff.
And I recommend that it's time to go home.
We
Not
have
yet.
three
Getting
points of
close.
business, some quick votes here. The first one is the issuance of the bond for 152 Main Street, which is the India Society of Worcester. If you just want to read a motion to accept the issuance, or,
Time to read this whole thing.
nope,
I move that we discuss.
issue the bond.
Issue the bond for site plan approval and special permit, India Society of Worcester, 152 Main Street.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You can read out the amount next time.
Oh.
That's all right.
In the amount of $6,935.75.
Great, if you could sign that as well, and then pass it down.
We all have to sign it?
Yes, please. Doing the same with the next one, so.
I move that we issue or release the bond.
No, this is an issuance again.
Okay, I move that we issue the bond for site plan approval, United Rentals, 167 to 169 Memorial Drive, in the amount of $215.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
This next one is a bond release, Jay.
Okay.
I'm going to recuse myself.
Oh, okay. Your name's on it, but obviously you just won't sign it.
This one's a release.
Yep, this is a release, and you can just read the regarding section, and then all remaining, all funds being held.
I move that we release the bond to 59 Olympia Ave and 3 Muzzy Ave multifamily townhouses, bond dated June 2nd, 2016, at the account at the Shrewsbury Federal Credit Union
The Lakeway Common duplexes.
for Lakeway Common duplexes.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, well, you're signing that. I will just tell you the last order of new business is Town Center Zoning District Update. Currently, the Planning Department, Planning and Economic Development Department has finished its strategy document for moving forward with rezoning the town center. I and/or Kristen Lass are going to be presenting to the Board of Selectmen at the end of the month. We are currently in the process of drafting the bylaws to create an independent town center zoning district, which is very exciting. Based on the town visioning project we did last year, the town parking project, and there's the ongoing wayfinding project. The idea is to give the town center its own unique identity and to give it the possibility, or open the possibilities to making it a more traditional New England town village to encourage that type of development. So again, pretty exciting stuff. We are moving forward with it. All of you will be involved in it, of course, over time. We're gonna be starting to hold public forums. We hope to hold the first one in November already, if we can get moving as quickly as we hope. And then hopefully the second one in December, and then move on to getting ready for town meeting in this late winter and spring. So that's kind of our tentative timeline. I have some documents that I've shared with Board of Selectmen that you will also be getting copies of for the next meeting. But I want this to be made public. Obviously, this is no secret. We want everyone to know about it and hopefully be supportive of it and give their ideas and feedback. So there'll be more to come, but I just wanted to give everyone an update on where we are. Like I said, this is the good stuff. This is what we hope
good
to
news.
really help the town center move forward. So.
When's the RFP? Do we anticipate the RFP on the old Beal School?
So that's gonna be just specifically for the Beal. We're hoping that this will coincide with the RFP, so anything that's in the RFP is gonna be probably pretty aligned with what we're coming up with anyhow. Timeline for that, I believe we were awarded the amount, I can't remember how much, for the RFP to get help on drafting it. I believe we're still trying to get it out by December, or maybe even early November, and then have some people start weighing in. We gotta get together with the consultants first, but we're on a pretty aggressive timeline with that too, so. That's where we're
Very
at.
good. Awesome.
All
Thank
right,
you.
Thank you, everyone.
You will be
Uh,
impacted.
That's all we have for this evening. I'd
Yes.
entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.